Hey everyone, Charlie Morgan here, and welcome to Polarity Paradoxes. Once you sort out your emotions and your ego, and once you have your identity defined, your goal set, and a good understanding of mindset, and you're working on your beliefs, once you sort your shit out, it becomes about your thinking, how successful you can be. So the identity is the important thing to begin with, and the paradigm is sort of underneath that. So far through this training, we've gone through paradigm, we've gone through your goal, we've gone through your identity, we've also talked about pain and resistance and time. And now that you're in the process of sorting yourself out and quote unquote getting your shit together, once you've done that, the level of success you're able to accomplish becomes far more about your thinking and how you take in information, process it, and then output it. You're a system, right? And information is an input. Your brain is basically a process that uses that information to then create outputs. And in life, we have inputs and we have outputs. Now, everyone has the same inputs, right? No, not everyone, because if you don't buy this program, you don't have the input of the information. But for the most part, you have access to most information all the time. And so what goes on between input and output is the thing that really matters. And the input and the output, what's going to sit in the middle of that all is your thinking and how you process information. Now, yes, your paradigm, your identity, it all comes into that. And if you haven't got your identity sorted and your self sorted and your paradigm sorted, then any attempt to think critically is going to probably be wasted, because you're going to end up thinking well, this isn't me. There's no point anyway. I'm just going to give up. So we've kind of gone through this mindset training in a very linear fashion. And we started with yourself and your paradigm, but now I'm actually going to explain a model for thinking, to actually process information and see reality and deal with reality and see the world in a way that very few people can. This is Polarity Paradoxes, and we're going to talk about non-binary thinking here. This has taken me 5 years to learn, and it is my most cherished weapon when it comes to thinking. This thing is the magnitude of this and the effect this can have on your life and your ability to make money and have fun and just basically have a better life is, you can't measure how effective this thing is, because it's just off the scales. When you make this shift in your thinking, and when you apply this to your life and you really listen to what I'm telling you in this video and apply it, and you sort of go down to the deepest level of your brain and just turn a little switch to make yourself think in this way, you'll process information in a way that nobody else can. I have done thousands of hours of coaching, and I've spoken to thousands of business owners, 3,000 people on sales calls at this point, and even more elsewhere. And it's extremely hard to find someone that can think like this. And I know a few people that think like this, and ironically, they're the most successful people I know. And I realized that, and so I studied it, and I've learned how to think in this way, and it is going to completely change your life. All of my strategies, my sales strategies, my cold outreach strategies, my cold email strategies, my cold messaging strategies, my cold calling strategies, my YouTube organic strategies, the inbound stuff we use, the mindset training, the offer training, everything that I've produced is a result of non-binary thinking, which is what we're going to talk about in this video. And if you want to produce good outputs in life, you need to have a good process to process the information that comes in through life. And it kind of helps to know how to do that. So this video is going to be quite a long one, as you can tell, but if you master this and you really nail this, you can kind of move through life and be as fluid as you want, and nothing will stick to you and nothing will seem like a problem. And it's just, dude, when you get to this point, I can't tell you enough how nice it is to be able to think like this. It opens up so many doors. So that's enough of me just trying to sell it to you, because I need you to pay attention to this, because this will be the thing that separates everyone else. This is a thing that you have to practice all the time, and it's something that it will just, one day it'll just click, right? It took me 5 years. I had to listen and train and do this every week, and it took me a lot of time, but I've done it and it has served me well. So let's talk about this. Let's get into this. So the thing in question is non-binary thinking. I'm going to introduce what that means and how it works in a while. Then we're going to talk about inversion. The second thing is idiosyncrasy's best friend. Now, the other thing is I'm going to give you 30 examples, because what I'm going to try and do is explain how to think, but it becomes very intangible and very difficult to articulate. So I'm going to give you 30 concrete examples, and throughout this video, I'm going to constantly link things back to real world examples that I've either used to make more money or things that you can use to make more money and grow your business. This extends way beyond your company. This is a new way of life. It's a new way of thinking, which creates a whole new way of living. Everything in your life will improve when you apply this. Not just making money and growing your business and signing more clients, but like how healthy you are, the quality of your relationships, the quality of your relationship with yourself. Everything will improve as a result of this. It is by far the best thing I've ever learned to do, except from transforming myself and the identity stuff. Then we're going to actually talk about defining your identity poles, non-binary identity sliders, exercising judgment, and spectrum thinking. So we're going to bring your awareness to a very big problem that's plaguing a lot of people, and I'm going to teach you how to get rid of it. It's remarkable, and when you can do this, I promise you, it seems like a long one, but it's going to be amazing for you. So let's do a quick exercise, and what I'm going to do is show you some images, and I want you to get a pen and paper, and I want you to write down what you feel is right and what you feel is wrong, right? I'm going to show you some images, and go and grab a pen and paper, grab it now, right? You should be taking notes anyway. I'm going to show you some images, and I want you just to, the first thing that comes to your mind, I want you to write R for right or W for wrong, right? Don't think, the point there is not thinking. And I want you to like critically think like, is that right or is that wrong, or how wrong, how right? Just right or wrong is what I want you to write down. Now, we're starting this off with an exercise. We're taking action immediately because I'm going to demonstrate like how this is a problem for you in a while. So don't worry about it. I'm going to show you some examples. Don't think, just right. Okay, so right or wrong. So here we've got a bunch of guys partying and being really social and basically going out, and it looks like they're in a nightclub. Then we've got someone here chilling on their own in nature, in this sort of big lake in nature, just by themselves and probably being quite calm, nobody else around. Here we've got someone doing really hard work and slightly stressing themselves out and burning themselves out. Looks like they're drowning in a lot of work, and they're having a kind of hard time. Then we've got someone sitting on a beach with a laptop, clearly relaxing, just enjoying that laptop lifestyle, not really ever working themselves too hard or taking anything too hard. And they might not make as much money as the person who's stressed, but you know, they're just sitting on the beach. Then we've got Robert Downey Jr. playing Tony Stark as Iron Man. Here is a billionaire arms dealer selling weapons to obviously kill people, and here he is about to display some missiles and blow up that mountain behind him. Then we've got someone giving to charity, taking care of people that aren't as wealthy or well off as them, and this person looks like they're about to give some food or some money to this homeless person. And here we've got some greasy food, basically just burgers and chips and onion rings and just greasy food that could be considered unhealthy. And then we've got a salad with all sorts of fresh vegetables and tomatoes and stuff in it, and that's the salad. You probably know that's a salad, right? Then we've got a monk. This would represent discipline, being calm, being focused and working really hard, controlling your emotions and basically telling your body what to do and not basically doing anything that you don't want to do, having monk-like discipline. And then we've got someone being extremely lazy, just laying back, drinking cans of soda, eating cereal for lunch, watching the TV with their feet up in the middle of the day, and just basically being lazy and not doing anything. And then here we've got someone ignoring someone, basically saying, no, I don't want to talk to you. I don't really want to listen to you. I'm just going to do this thing on my phone instead. And then we've got someone caring for someone and listening to them and making sure they're okay and taken care of. So this person here would be like, I don't want to hear about your problems, you solve them. And this person here is like, tell me about your problems, I want to solve them with you. And then we've got someone here looking really serious. Someone basically taking life seriously. They're not here to mess around. They're not here to play around. They want to get it done, and they're not going to take any shit from anyone. They're just really serious. And then we got this kid who's obviously having a good time. He's playful. He's not serious in the slightest. He's just going to be running around, probably making the carpet a little bit messy with the paint on his hands. But he's just basically a silly, playful kid who doesn't really do anything serious. And then here we've got some Trump supporters looking a bit passionate and slightly angry, and they're there to rally around Trump and obviously get him into presidency. And then here we've got some Biden supporters on the other side of the coin. They're looking a little bit more serious, but their political views represent a completely different realm to these guys. And then here we've got someone learning from a mentor, someone who's basically listening to someone older than him or more experienced than him, and he's lapping it up and he's really listening and paying attention, and he's the kind of person who always goes to his mentor for advice and is always asking for advice. And then here we've got someone working on their own and basically just doing stuff and being on their own, and this picture represents trying to do it on your own without a mentor. I know it's just someone sat in a restaurant in Japan, but I couldn't actually find a picture of lack of mentorship, right? So here's someone working, let's pretend he's working on his own. He doesn't want to listen to anyone else. He just basically wants to listen to himself and do the work himself, and he doesn't want to have to do anything else or talk to anyone else. Now, for each of these pairs, you've likely got a right and a wrong, okay? So this is natural, right? Our standard human programming is binary, and we'll always by default pick a side. So through life, the way that most humans deal with reality is using a duality or a dualism as a model. And duality basically splits everything in life into right and wrong, or up and down, or black and white. And it's a very efficient way of thinking. The reason everyone thinks through binary duality, dual-based terms, and the reason that you think there's a right and a wrong is because it's efficient. The brain loves efficiency, because an efficient brain means less calories. Well, the brain can be smaller, which means the brain requires less calories to run, which means that in childbirth, the human head can actually be smaller, because a smaller brain requires a smaller skull, which means childbirth is less dangerous for a mother. If you're ever wondering why, like, your brain loves to be efficient and it likes to have these sort of corner-cutting models, that's why. But when you come out of the womb and when you're born, like, that's not the only reason, but it kind of is one of the biological premises for this duality. Like, you're not seeing the full spectrum of things. Now, it might sound weird, Charlie. Why the hell are you talking about brain size and childbirth and like? It'll make sense as we go through this video, but it's totally normal. As you go through these, you probably feel some sort of emotion, right? You might think this is right or wrong, or this is the right way to do it, or this is really wrong, and then this person here is really right. Or this guy, I actually look up to him, and then this person, I'd never give to the homeless, they can help themselves. You might think that. Maybe you think greasy food is right or wrong, and you've probably got opinions, and you probably think that there's a right and wrong for all of these things. And so if you think that like loud music is the best thing in the world, then you might think that quiet music is the worst thing in the world, right? Or maybe you think that like going for long distance runs is the right thing to do for fitness, and then you would take that side, and then by taking that side, you immediately say that short distance running is not good for fitness, right? Or it's not as good for fitness. Everything in life works on a binary scale for most people. When you pick a side, you naturally don't pick the other side. And so by defining what you believe is right, you always define what you believe is wrong. And this creates a real issue in life, because it stops you from seeing things clearly. And there's going to be stuff in your life where you can probably name 100 things right now, or things that you think are right, whether it's politicians or food or like the way a business should be run. You're going to have these polls, and you're always going to be thinking like right or wrong. And every time something happens in your life, you're going to process it through your duality and think that suits me, or that doesn't suit me, or I think that's right, or I think that's wrong. Like, you shouldn't do this, or you should do that. And it creates this duality, and it's the way that the human mind has been conditioned and built to deal with reality. Ever since childbirth, we are then thrown into life, and you're sort of gripped by duality. It's very charming, because humans like things to be like one or two, because we've got two sides of our brain. It kind of like works in the brain's favor to just be like one or the other. And by nature, we like symmetry. We like things that are just paired. So it's natural, but we need to break this duality. We need to destroy it and replace it with something far more advanced and something that's going to serve you better. Because for as long as you look at things in this sort of like binary dichotomy, black and white, right and wrong, up and down way, you're going to be missing out on a huge array of opportunities and chances and options and decisions that you could be making that are far more conducive to you getting what you want. And let's actually discuss why this is a problem and why you should care about this. So let's actually dive into this now. So that's some examples. You should now be aware that, of course you're aware. You know that you know what's right, you know what's wrong, you know what you like, you know what you don't like, you know what you love, you know what you hate. If you love like metal and you absolutely love like metal music and like hardcore metal music, then when you love that and you take it to an extreme, you probably hate classical music. And likewise, if you decide that you hate, or like if you decide you love classical music, then you might hate metal music. Like you can't really, if you pick a side, then there's another side that you haven't picked, right? And I'm going to explain that. You might be wondering, well, of course, yeah, duh, like of course that's how it works. But let's talk about why this is a problem. So, non-binary thinking. So humans have biases, right? We tend to think that there is a right way and there is a wrong way. And so we have this diagram on the screen here where you pick a side and you decide if something's right or something's wrong, or you decide if you should do something or you shouldn't do something. So if you decide that like on sales calls, I should always ask emotional questions, then like you're never not going to not ask emotional questions because you've picked a side and you're always going to think the other side is wrong. And as we go through life, we tend to pick a side. The side we pick is really, it's kind of influenced by our environment and the people around us. So where you're polarized on these right and wrong scales will depend mostly on other human beings. Now, through life, you're not taught to think critically and independently of human beings. And so right now, you probably don't think in non-binary terms because, well, A, you've never been exposed to it, right? Or B, because, well, everybody else thinks in this black and white way, right and wrong way. Like, and what you'd pick and how you decide what to pick will really be dependent on the people around you. So, you know, family, your friends, people that you look up to, people that you don't look up to, right? It's all going to be shaped based on that. So if you've got a friend and you really don't like him and he supports Trump, then you might decide that Trump is wrong, right? It's kind of like all of these binary states and these decisions you make are going to be based on other people's decisions. Now, you'll get to a point where eventually that isn't true, and that's idiosyncrasy. You'll become idiosyncratic where you can go against what everyone else is doing. And that's what I'm able to do at this point. And that's what a lot of other people can do that are really successful. Not that I'm really successful, because success, you're not a success, you're not a failure. You're kind of like, well, how successful or how much of a failure are you? Right? There's no binary thing there, but you can see, like, even gets me to this day. I'm still working on it. But, you know, we form opinions based on what we believe is right and what we believe is wrong. And when we form an opinion on what is right, we immediately form an opinion on what is wrong, and vice versa. You cannot think something is right without thinking its opposite is wrong. It's impossible, right? And this happens all the time. Just look at politics. So in politics, you've got the right or you've got the left, right? So it's like, I support Trump, therefore I do not support Hillary. Or I support, in the UK, we've got the Conservatives and then we've got Labour. So it's kind of like, you've probably in your country, if you're in a democracy, then you've probably got one dominant party and then another dominant party. And you'll find that the population is divided between those two parties, and who you support is closely like associated with your identity. And if you are a conservative, then you will immediately think that the Labour Party is wrong. And if you think that Trump is right, you'll think Biden is wrong. So, you know, this is how this thing works. It's right and left in politics. Or diet, you know. For example, you'll find that there might be someone who's a vegan. And someone who's a vegan will think that eating meat is wrong. And then someone that eats meat will think that being a vegan is wrong. Like, these people, like, they will pick a side, and then, like, when they decide and define what is right, they also define what is wrong in the process. It's impossible to decide what is right without deciding what is wrong. It's a duality. You can't not do it. And it can be anything, right? Like, to bring this to an example of cold email, right? You might think, okay, yep, sending quantity. Quantity is the way to do it. That's what's right, which means that you decide that sending quality is wrong. Or if you think, yep, I keep hearing that I need to do these audits and stuff. I need to do less volume and really like focus and do like 10-minute looms and shit like that. So I'm going to send quality, and sending quality is right. So sending quantity is wrong. And it's like, well, okay, like you've picked your side. Or you might think like take running, for example, with fitness. Like, there's people out there that think that running is the best thing for you. And then there's people out there that think running is the worst thing for you. So if you think running is the worst thing, then you might think cycling is the best thing. And if you think cycling is the best thing, you might think running is the worst thing. So when you pick a side, and the other side is neglected. And people form opinions and they pick a side, and then the opposite of their opinion is wrong. And this is a huge problem. Let me tell you why. Once you pick a side, you'll obviously think the other side is wrong. And this is how you trap yourself. Once you pick a side or polarize yourself to one binary pole, you trap yourself. This is how you snooker yourself. This is how you checkmate yourself. It's how you get yourself into a corner and you're not able to move. I'm going to explain why. So, binary traps. This is like the biggest problem that I see today, right? Except from the identity thing. This is a huge one. You will form your identity, self-image, and paradigm or worldview around the sides you pick, the binary states you have assumed. This becomes a problem because your goals will demand you to behave out of accordance with the sides you have picked. And then when this happens, you will simply refuse because of thoughts like, that's not me, or it's wrong to do that, or that's against what I believe in. So obviously, like, the political party that you believe in or associate with, or the religion you have, or whether you think running is good, or whether you think eating meat is good, that might not have a direct influence on your ability to make money and achieve your goal. Those are just examples that, you know, you can see because it's quite clear, and emotions are tied to those. But in business, like, you've got your identity and you've got what you think is right and wrong to do in business, and how you think you should behave and how you think you should act and shit. And so, like, in business, if you think that, like, being aggressive on a sales call is right and being passive on a sales call is wrong, then sometimes your goal will, like, require you to be passive on a sales call. And if you've polarized yourself and you think passivity is wrong, then you won't behave in that way. And the truth is that it doesn't matter how you want to behave. It matters how your goal needs you to behave to make it manifest. And so, like, take, for example, this mindset training with, you know, 2.5 to 3 hour long videos. And, like, some people might polarize themselves and they might think that, like, long form content, quote unquote, isn't for them, or long form content is wrong, or nobody can concentrate for longer than 2 hours. These are like polarized beliefs. And so when you think that, like, long form content is, like, wrong, then you think that short form content is right. And so your whole life will be dictated through this binary pole, which means you're only ever going to engage in short form content. And when a module like this comes along that actually has the ability to lever you up and give you what you want, you'll look at it and think, 2 hour, 3 hour videos, that's not me, that's not what I believe in. It's wrong to do long form content. I'm not even going to touch it. And this is what happens, right? Another example could be mindset in general. People polarize themselves to thinking that training mindset is the right thing to do. And then there's other people that think that training mindset is the wrong thing to do. So if you think that mindset is, like, wrong, then you're going to think that, like, the opposite is right. And so if you come into the program, we know that, like, mindset is one of the core components of acquisition. But, like, a lot of people are polarized to think that mindset, like, training mindset, is a complete waste of time. And so when they come to the program, they're not going to take action on the mindset training because, well, they think it's wrong. They've polarized themselves. And binary traps, this is really fucking stupid, right? If you want to achieve your goal and make decisions that help you do that, you need to be prepared to let go of any polarization that you have in your life that's holding you back, right? You need to be ready to let go of your binary states, your poles. You need to be ready to contradict yourself and change your behavior and change what you think is right and wrong. Now, I'm not going to tell you which political party to believe in. I'm not going to tell you what to eat. I'm not going to tell you whether or not you should change your religion. None of that is up for discussion because that's stuff that matters to you and that probably means something to you and you're probably emotionally tied to it. It will help to play around with those things at some point, as I have done, but, like, we're talking more about, like, the business thing. The problem is you can't really, this isn't localized just to business. If you've got polarization in other areas of your life, it will manifest in your business and it will massively hold you back because your brain will you can't really have, well, you can actually. You can have binary and non-binary thinking together. In fact, you want both of them because to not have both of them would be binary and then you'd be back to square one. So you kind of need to have both, but at the same time, like, I don't want you guys to think that I'm going to hop in here and start telling you to believe in a different thing or, you know, to just start trying a different diet because I think it's right. That's not what I'm trying to accomplish. I just want to make that clear. But there are going to be sides that you have picked and binary poles that you have locked yourself to that you need to break and contradict if you want to get what you want. You have to understand that your goal is going to set the conditions, right? And your goal will tell you what you need to do to accomplish it. Now, it won't tell you directly, but it becomes pretty clear, like, what you need to do to achieve your goal. And so if you've polarized yourself to believe you're an introvert and you want to make 10 grand a month with a company, you need to do sales calls, right? And so, like, you have to let go of being introverted to temporarily become extroverted so you can do sales calls. Or if your goal is to build a YouTube channel that 100,000 subscribers and make money through YouTube, and you've polarized yourself to, like, you know, bad speech, right? And you're umming and ahhing and you think that it's hard to articulate and you polarize yourself in that way, then you need to let go of that and think that it's right to articulate yourself. Because if you want to start a YouTube channel and you're judging people who speak clearly and articulate themselves because you think they're just over the top and fancy with their words and you want to keep things simple, and then you go and try and start a YouTube channel and all of your content is just really boring and simple, then you're not going to win. And so you need to be able to look at what you think is right and actually just say, okay, I'm going to let go of that. And this is, I promise this will make more sense as we go through, but it is really the main thing to do, is to let go of everything that you think is right. And I'm not saying you have to introduce what you think is wrong, but you have to stop being at either side of the spectrum. You have to sort of sit in the middle. So if you imagine that like you've got right on one end and then wrong on the other end, you kind of have to be able to slide your way between the both, two of them, depending on the situation that you find yourself in. And contradiction is the secret to success. And you need to let go of being right and wrong and focus on being able to be or basically agree with both sides. So I am at the point now in life where I don't have strong, convicted opinions on anything, right? I have convictions, because to not have convictions and opinions on anything would mean that you're once again entering this binary state. So there's a paradox here. If you take non-binary things, if you only think in non-binary terms and not in binary terms, then you're not thinking in non-binary terms, because if you were just thinking in one term and not the other, then you'd be in a binary state. So I have like opinions and convictions on certain things, but they are subject to change at any given moment. I'm not emotionally attached to them. My ego's not attached to them. And if I need to let go of something, or if I need to admit that I've been wrong and I need to do something else, the complete opposite of that thing, suddenly I need to completely just like snap and change myself, I have no qualms with letting go of what I believe to be right and true. Now, there's also a caveat, because if you do that all the time, then once again, you're not being non-binary. So I have some things that are really near and dear to my heart that I do believe in that I wouldn't change, even if it required me of it, if that makes sense. But there's very few of them, and I've critically thought through them, and I've also seen that they're not going to be subject to a change in my reality, so that you can believe in like God and other certain things that really mean something to you. And you don't have to necessarily like fuck with those or change those for whatever reason. But my point here is like, you want to become non-binary, but also not to the point where you're not binary, because then you wouldn't be both, right? And you need to be both. So it's a really difficult paradox to explain and tackle, but you need to basically have this tendency to not marry yourself to ideas, ideologies, perspectives, opinions, beliefs, or anything like that. You need to be able to just completely let go of anything at any given time and the circumstances change. And like I say, contradiction is the secret to success. So what I'm going to do is actually walk you through some examples right now. I know this is sounding confusing, and I know that it gets a little bit complicated, and you might be thinking, how does that make sense? We've all got this association with contradiction that it's a bad thing, but I'm going to show you now why contradiction is actually the best thing possible. And it might sound like I'm contradicting myself when I say that you need to be non-binary, but then you also need to be binary, but then you also need to have things that are subject to change, but you also need to have things that you can't change. Like, it all sounds really confusing. So let's actually give some concrete examples. And I'm going to walk you through some of the best athletes and business people to sort of drill this point home, so I can show you what I mean here. So let's walk through some examples. So here's Muhammad Ali. Now, the thing about Muhammad Ali is, back in his time, heavyweight boxing, people were slow. Okay, so if you were a heavyweight boxer, you really did pack a punch. You could really swing and like really do some damage, but your punches were quite slow and clunky, because obviously you're heavy. And you know, if you go back and like watch like older boxers before Muhammad Ali's time, then you'd find that they were really sort of like, you know, they were slow and really powerful, but they didn't have that quickness. And like, there were other boxers, like lightweight boxers, that were really fast and really like, you know, furious, and they could really like fly around the ring and like really do fancy shit, and they were so quick, but they never packed the punch of a heavyweight boxer. Like, sure, they could punch harder professional boxers, but like, we had heavyweight boxers that were slow and powerful, and we had lightweight boxers that were fast but not as powerful. Along comes Muhammad Ali, and this man can punch like a heavyweight boxer, but he can move and has the speed of a lightweight boxer. And he became the greatest boxer, if not athlete, of all time. Right? He's called the greatest for a reason. And Muhammad Ali, he was a walking contradiction. Nobody had ever seen anyone box like that ever. Because most people in the boxing world thought that you're either, you know, you're a bit overweight and heavy and like you move slowly, but when you move, you really do some damage, or you are at the other end of the spectrum. And they were in this sort of right and wrong section, because they thought like a heavyweight shouldn't move slowly because then he'll lose his power. But Muhammad Ali came along and he was like, I'm going to do both, bitch. And like, if you watch Muhammad Ali box, it's beautiful, because He's got this speed and agility that you would only ever find in someone that's a lightweight boxer. But then when he punches, it's kind of like he's hitting like a truck. So this is an example of like non-binary thinking in practice. And here's Alex Honnold. He's one of the greatest climbers of all time. He's still alive. He climbed El Capitan, I think that's how you pronounce it, El Cap, without a rope. And it's basically a wall in Yosemite, and it's like, thousands and thousands of feet high, and like nobody's ever climbed it without a rope. It's just kind of a death wish. In climbing, there's two types of climbing. You have bouldering, and bouldering is basically where you climb like a small wall, but it's more problem-based, and you're trying to get up the wall quickly, as fast as you can. And then you've got big wall climbing, which is still problem-based, but you're trying to take your time and be more methodical. Both of them require you to be methodical, but bouldering is you have to get up there quickly, and when it comes to climbing like a big wall like Yosemite, people really take their time. Alex Honnold climbed El Cap in under 4 hours. And it takes most people days, if not weeks, of sleeping on the wall to do that. And so Alex Honnold combined what he knew about bouldering and what he knew about big wall climbing into one. And so he was moving up the wall in a way that boulderers do, where he was being extremely fast and really just moving about and picking things. But then he had the stamina to maintain that and keep it going for 4 hours. And this is another example of a non-binary person. And I'm not talking about like non-binary genders, because I think he identifies as a male, right? I'm not going to get into that argument. But this is another great example of non-binary thinking. Like, people think that like climbers are either slow and methodical, or like fast and like they're still methodical, but it's like you're slow or you're fast. And he was just like, he looked at climbing and he was just like, yeah, I'm just going to do both. And here's Michael Jordan, right? So when he was playing basketball before then, in the basketball world, you were either an offensive or a defensive player. And that was kind of how you were structured. And that's how basketball teams were structured. It's like you'd have offensive teams and you'd have defensive teams, and you'd have like the team would be split into those two sections. Michael Jordan came along and he basically was like, well, fuck that, I'm going to do both. And he learned to become the best offensive player in the world and the best defensive player in the world. And nobody had ever seen it before. Right? And he became the greatest basketball player arguably of all time. And he did that through this non-binary reasoning, where he looked at these two ends of the spectrum, these two poles of like, I'm an offensive player. If I'm an offensive player, it means I'm not a defensive player. If I'm a defensive player, it means I'm not an offensive player. He looked at that and just thought, yeah, I'm going to chuck that out and just basically put them both together. And the result of that was Michael Jordan. Here's Leonardo DiCaprio. So in the acting world, it's kind of like pretty common for actors to have a niche, right? And you can become a famous actor in a niche, right? So if you look at like certain actors like The Rock, for example, he'll play like a pretty traditional role of like, being like this big masculine dude. But Leonardo DiCaprio, he has the ability to become anyone and play any role. So, one time he'll be playing like a hunter in, like, if you've seen The Revenant, it's a great film. He's like playing a hunter in like up in Canada or some shit like that. And he's playing this really sort of rough, like hardy character. And then he'll be playing like a multi-millionaire in The Wolf of Wall Street. And then he'll be playing, the dude is just so able to just go between roles. And it's once again a non-binary thing. So like a lot of actors will think it's like, okay, I am an action actor and I play in action movies. And that means that when I get like, nobody would ever offer him, an action movie guy, a role for another movie because he's an action movie guy. And like, then you've got another person like who might be more along the lines of like, yeah, so I only do like intellectual stuff. So if you look at Benedict Cumberbatch, for example, you look at his roles, with the exception of like Doctor Strange, which is a superhero movie, and maybe some other ones, the dude genuinely fits the same role. And he's still a great actor because he can do shit like Doctor Strange. I could have put him on this slide. But my point here is Leonardo DiCaprio looks at this binary dichotomy of like, you either are an action actor or a different kind or whatever. And he was like, no, fuck that, I'm just going to do both. And so the guy is one of the greatest actors to ever live because he's got the ability to do both and he can contradict himself. Like one minute he'll be doing one thing and the next minute he'll be doing the complete opposite. And everyone's like, how the hell do you do that? And just by trying. And Tiger Woods. Before Tiger Woods, who's arguably the greatest golfer to have ever walked this planet, Tiger Woods, before Tiger Woods, golfing was seen as a leisurely sport with like, old white guys who typically were quite overweight. Golf was never seen as an athletic sport. It was never like seen in a way that you like play golf to take care of your body. When Tiger Woods came along, the dude was an athlete. So he his golfing skills as seriously as he took his health and his personal fitness and his body. And he changed the game of sport with that dichotomy. Because everyone thought that golfers were like overweight, not overweight, but everyone was like, golfers are just like lazy and unhealthy for whatever reason. And Tiger Woods came along and he was like, well, I'm actually going to like apply what I know about athleticism and biology to make my body perform better. And it was through like taking that and putting that in, and then basically having the best golf skill and also the best athlete skills in terms of your physical fitness, that the dude just rolled through everyone. And then like now, if you look at golfers nowadays, they're athletes. They're like insanely fit and they look really healthy. And this is another example. And Arnold Schwarzenegger, the dude is one of the greatest bodybuilders of all time. And when he was around, people thought that like you either lifted really heavy, like low reps, heavy weights, or high reps and low weights. And the dude was like, I want to do heavy weights at high reps. And then not only that, but after this, the dude went on to be an actor, and then he went on to be a politician. Like, what the hell? Like, the dude's like non-binary, and he's one of the greatest like athletes and politicians and actors. Maybe not the greatest actor of all time, but Arnold's got this ability to just, he's so non-binary. Like as a bodybuilder, he might be like, I'm a bodybuilder and that's that. I don't know many bodybuilders who become politicians. Do you? It's kind of like the complete opposite of a politician. He doesn't care. He just jumped between the two. And here's XXXTentacion. You may not know him. He's a rapper. I'm not a huge fan of him, but he's dead now. But he made a really big splash with his music. He's got songs that sound like hell. It's just him screaming into a microphone, just like swearing like the house down. And then he's got other songs that are like considered really beautiful and poetic, like love songs. So like people think the rappers are either like, you're making love songs and it's all sort of like romantic and shit, or you're just screaming into a microphone and just trying to offend as many people as you can in a 2-minute period. But the dude did both. And if you look on Spotify, he's got billions of streams for songs that like sound like they've been written out of like pure emotion and love felt like emotion. And then he's got songs that sound like they're written out of pure anger. And like the reason he's one of like the most popular, or was one of the most popular rappers and one of the most famous rappers and just rose to fame really quickly, is because the dude didn't identify with that. He wasn't like, I'm just a scream rapper and I scream at things and that's that. He was like, no, I'm going to do both because people like both and people can have both. And then Elon Musk. So like, I mean, I don't really need to explain this in too much detail, right? The dude's like about as non-binary as it gets. Like the reason I put him on here is because I wanted to demonstrate something. His personality from an outsider's perspective is really friendly. So when you look at Elon Musk on Joe Rogan's podcast or the news, or when you look at him like doing presentations, he just seems like this sort of like slightly awkward, nerdy guy, but you like him. He's a nice guy. But I can tell you that when this dude's running his companies, he's anything but friendly. Like if you step out of line or if you make a mistake, he will like terrorize you and probably fire you. But we don't see that side of him in the public. So he's got the ability to be both. He can come across as this like friendly, darling angel of Silicon Valley, but then he also like has the ability to just completely like emotionlessly like ruin people's lives and just, well, I'm not saying ruin, but like if you fucked him over, he'd probably stop at nothing to just take you apart, right? And then here's Eliud Kipchoge, I think that's his name. I might be mispronouncing that. Here's the dude that ran a marathon in less than 2 hours, right? Arguably one of the most like incredible athletic feats ever. People think that like they say that like it's a marathon, not a sprint. And the whole idea behind that statement is it's like slow and steady wins the race, right? And it's like everyone thinks that to run a marathon you have to pace yourself and like really like you can't sprint and you got to go really slowly and like that's that. But then this guy came along. I mean, obviously he's like an African super athlete, but he came along and the dude held like a 13 mile per hour pace for like 2 hours. And that's like most people sprinting. So most people try and run a marathon, like they'll sprint for like 100 meters and then they'll like collapse and die. But this dude was like, I'm going to hold a sprint for like 2 hours. And like the result of that non-binary thinking and doing the thing that's basically combining both, it's a massive contradiction. And, he's one of the best runners of all time. And then Mr. Beast, right, with YouTube. So he's nearing 100 million subscribers as of me recording this. Before Mr. Beast, everyone would rely on one of two things to grow their YouTube channel. They either would like spend all their time focusing on the marketing of the video, like the thumbnail, the description, and the title, and they'd make the YouTube video as clickbait as possible. and then they'd spend no time on the actual production of the video, and their channel would grow just through clickbait content. Or they'd spend all their time on the production of the video, but no time on the marketing of the video. So people thought that like YouTube, you either grow a channel through like clickbaity content or valuable content that not many people watch. And then Mr. Beast came along and he was like, well, I'm going to create clickbait content, but then actually deliver. So if you go and look at most of Mr. Beast's videos, you'll probably think that they are like, well, they're probably not real because some of them are insane. But then when you click on the video and watch, he actually delivers on the promise of the title. And he's changed the game of YouTube with that model. And the other way that he's non-binary is he doesn't take his money out of his YouTube channel. So people think that with YouTube, it's like you build your YouTube channel, you build your audience, and then you take the ad revenue and you're going to spend it on yourself. But he was like, no, I'm going to just spend the like ad revenue on the subscribers. And you can see that by he gives away money and has better videos with the money that he makes. So it's an awesome example. And then Martin Luther King, final example here, because I know I'm running on a bit. But Martin Luther King is a great example of contradiction, because like back in his time in the USA, there's a lot of racism, right? And a lot of people wanted to solve racism by being racist. And so like you had white people and black people, and they were very sort of polarized into these two segments. And white people, like not all white people, of course, it's a very strong blanket generalization for such a monstrosity of a belief, right? But you get my point. There was a select white people and select black people. And the white people hated the black people, and the black people hated the white people. But Martin Luther King came along and he was like, I want my white and my black sons or brothers or children to be able to dine together. He was like, he's like, we can't solve hate with hate, because it's like kind of like it's like a binary state. Like if they're your enemy, how can they be your friend? And he realized the solution to the problem was integration through love. And by basically being like, why can't we be friends? We know they hate us, but let's try something other than hate to get them to love us. Let's try love to get them to stop hating. And it worked. And, the guy was a real genius with that. And like, he was really passionate and fire and stuff, but he was also extremely rational and calculating. So you kind of need to learn to be both in all such situations. And the most successful people transcend and break these dichotomies by contradicting themselves. And in doing so, they change the game. It's really hard to find an extremely successful person who has not applied this or contradicted themselves in one way or another. Like, successful people are both, and they know what's required of them to accomplish and achieve their goal, and they don't have any attachment to anything except from the goal and the outcome and the mission. And they will become anything or assume any form, and like what they believe in and what they think is right and wrong will change at any moment based on their goal and what they are trying to achieve. And the answers often lie in the middle, like with politics, right? The thing I don't get about politics is you've got the left and you've got the right. And the left has some good points and the right has some good points, right? So like maybe Trump's party, you might agree with some stuff, and then Biden's party, you might agree with some stuff. So like different parties have different perspectives. They're usually pretty opposite. And then they also have weaknesses, and then there's things that you might not agree with and based on your value system. But like, why can't we form a political party that sits in the middle? I know why. It's because like this binary thinking thing just plagues basically every human on the planet. But like, if you think critically about politics, I've always had this belief, even since I was like 14, 15 years old, I've always been like, it's just load of rubbish. Like, why can't we just get rid of like what is blatantly bad and then just put in what is blatantly good? But it's obviously more complicated than that. So what does transcending a binary state look like? Well, what happens is like we take black and we take white and we combine it to get grey. And this is a very simplification of a very complicated, well, it's not too complicated actually, it's quite simple as the premise, but when we combine the two, we get a gradient and we get the thing in the middle, and it's the middle that really wins. And you don't have to be smack bang in the middle. Like, you don't want to be at 50% every time, because that's another binary pole, right? If you're like, I'm always in the middle, then you're never going to really do anything or make any decisions. So it's kind of like you need to be able to be both, but you also need to be able to not be both. It's like a huge paradox, and a lot of people struggle to wrap their head around it. But when you do, like, my God, this stuff works. This is the power of contradiction. You produce the transcendence through both means. You combine both or shift between both, and that's how we win. And it depends, right? It depends. Everything depends. You'll notice if you listen to coaching calls or see me answer questions, like, and someone asks me a question, what they'll usually do is they'll have like an option, and then they'll have like a situation, and they want to know if the option, if applied to the situation, would create the solution they want. And like the answer I always give at the beginning is like, it depends. So if someone comes to me and they're like, hey Charlie, I've got this sales script and I kind of want to get rid of this emotional question because I find it's not working. Do you think I should do it? Like that's a binary state thinking, because they're thinking like I should either have the question or not have the question, right? And you might think, well, yeah, duh, like how can you have anything else? But like they're referring to removing the question from their whole script forever. So I would say, well, it depends. Like, what's the data? How do people respond to the question? And then it comes down to the guy being like, well, actually, I asked it one time and someone told me it was a rude question. I was like, so it's just like one person. Like, yeah. So like sometimes it might make sense to not ask that question, but other times, most of the time it will. So you don't want to remove it completely. You just want to temporarily remove it for people that you don't think is appropriate to ask, right? So this is just a really, I'll give you some other examples of this shortly, but that's sort of the premise. So you need to be able to play on both sides and use both sides of binary poles. The second you marry one side and label the other as wrong is the second you checkmate yourself into failure, because you never know when you're going to need to use the second side, right? Now, marriage is an interesting example, right? Because you might then think, well, if this binary thing doesn't work, then I can never get married. I'll just constantly be like, I'm going to get married and then I'll be single the next day and then I'll be like, that's not my point. Like with shit like that, like you're going to have to pick a side, right? Like unless you don't want to, that's fine. But you know, like I said, it's not going to apply to everything, but most things it will. So the environment will set conditions for the survival of your business, right? And it basically will set the precedent for what poles you need to play by to win. And like the situation, the circumstance, the environment, this thing will tell you what you need to do. And if you look at if you look at what is demanded of you by the environment and you think that's wrong, then it's because you polarize yourself to something that you think is right. And the only time something is right to do is when it helps you accomplish your goal. So if you're wondering like what is right and what is wrong, it's never dependent on your emotional baggage and how you feel about the thing. Like something is only right to do if it accomplishes your goal but does not diminish your integrity. That's kind of how I see the right and wrong thing. Like if an action does not help me accomplish a goal and I do it, then I've done the wrong thing. But if an action or a state or a binary pole helps me achieve my goal, then I will basically think, yeah, it's the right thing to do. So it's all about the goal. And the environment and the circumstance created by the goal will change all the time. So you need to be able to shift. And you need to become formless and change to either side depending on the demands of the circumstance you find yourself in. And it's a lot easier said than done, right? Trust me on that. It took me a very long time to figure out how to do this and become formless and become non-binary. But once I figured it out, this is the thing that kind of skyrocketed me, to be honest. Like, if you look at all of my strategies, right, all of the cold outreach strategies or sales strategies or mindset strategies, like it's all been born out of this shit. Like I'm always looking for like ways that I can hack everything through non-binary thinking. And it's kind of like the quality approach that we kind of gave birth to with the Loom system that you're going to probably familiarize yourself in the program with. Like everyone thought that with cold email, you either send hundreds of emails or you send like 5 or 10 a day. And I was like, why don't we just do both, like quality it? And everyone was like, oh my God, that's amazing. I was like, yeah, you just need to learn how to do this. And you need to reframe your relationship with contradiction for this to work. You don't want to see contradiction as a bad thing. You need to see it as a talent, right? Remove your ego from the binary poles in your life so you can dance between extremes and move wherever you need to move depending on your goal. So like I said, whether something's right or wrong will depend on whether or not being in that state or doing that thing helps you accomplish the goal without diminishing your integrity. So it's like everyone thinks that contradiction is bad and everyone's always looking out for contradiction. So if you're talking to someone and then they say one thing and then the next minute they say something else, you're going to be like, hang on, but you just said this. And, you know, we label people as hypocrites, right? And like, you know, if someone contradicts themselves, we'll be like, you're a hypocrite. And we think that being a hypocrite is bad, but like people are just stupid. And like, you know, imagine if someone looked at Muhammad Ali and said, what hypocrite? Like 1 minute he said that you need to punch as hard as you can. And the next minute he said you need to move as fast as you can. The dude's an idiot. How do you do both? And they're just so stuck and it's just so painful to see. So you need to look at contradiction and start to kind of like it. And like, because thinking in this way and behaving in this way contradicts like how every other human being behaves, people are going to tell you you're an idiot and they're going to label you and think that you're stupid. But then you just have to kind of do it for a while and then your results will do the talking. And then they'll just say you got lucky. And it's exactly what Bruce Lee said when he said, be like water. You know, water, if put in a cup, becomes the cup. Water, if put in a river, becomes the river. It's formless. Like even Muhammad Ali, he said like sting like a butterfly Sorry, that's a funny one. He said, sting like a bee, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. He meant like, sting like a bee is the power behind the punch, and float like a butterfly is being able to move as fast as someone that's a lightweight. So like that quote, a lot of people quote it, but they don't really know what the hell it means. And it's the same when Bruce Lee said, be like water. Like you need to be able to just change at any instant, like a chameleon or some shit like that. Just like, okay, environment demands me to be this, goal demands me to be this. Okay, I thought this was right, but now it's wrong. Change, switch, whoosh, done. And like when you can do this, dude, you can move anyway. So like, for example, when I started a business, I was bad with numbers, and I was polarized to thinking that accounting was boring, and that like it was never about accounting, and accounting was just shit and boring, and I hated it. And then like I realized I had to do accounting, and then I was just like, whoosh, okay, I love accounting, right? And then like if I did too much accounting and got way too involved in the numbers, then I'd be like, whoosh, back out, no longer love accounting. And then you just kind of like go whoosh, whoosh, like between the situations, depending on the circumstance. Like if you think that you're bad with numbers and statistics, then you're going to really fall short, because you need numbers and statistics to learn data and build systems. So like, if you think, statistics aren't for me, then you need to be like, whoosh, statistics are for me, I love them. And then you sort of learn how to deal with statistics, because now you think it's right to do, and then you're on with it, right? So it's like what is right and what is wrong depends on the goal, and that's that. And I learned to do this through inversion. So we're going to talk about inversion here. This is what I call idiosyncrasy's best friend. It's kind of where you just flip shit on its head and you achieve what you're trying to achieve through its opposite. And it kind of sounds a bit crazy and a bit wild, but inversion is one of my favorite tools for thinking, and it really lends well to this non-binary thing. So this module is all about figuring out what the right thing to do is. Because if you know, like if you've got your goal and you know what the right thing to do to achieve that goal is, then, and you do it, then you're going to achieve the goal. But the problem is like a lot of people, they know what the right thing to do is, but they can't do it. That's the first part of this video, or the first part of this training series, where like they're like, I know I need to do outreach, but I can't. And then we look at the identity, and we look at the pain avoidance, and we look at the beliefs, and we're like, okay, well that makes sense. But when you know what the right thing to do is, and you're not doing it, then it's mindset. But a lot of people might not even know what the right thing to do is in the first place. And so we need to know what the right thing to do is before we can actually do it. So this part of this video is going to show you how to know what the right thing to do is, because we want to know what the right thing to do is, right? So the best way to find out what the right thing to do is to flip it on its head and figure out what the wrong thing to do is. Because if you know what like the wrong thing to do is, then you can look at the opposite of wrong, and then you found out right. So you're kind of just two inversions away from always knowing what to do at all times. Because you just like, it's a lot easier to figure out what's wrong than what's right. Because if I was like, well, how do you get no meetings? It's like, well, you do no outreach. If you're like, Charlie, what do I do to grow my business? And I'm like, well, how many meetings have you got? It's like, none. How do I get meetings? I'm like, well, how do you not get meetings? No outreach. What's the opposite of no outreach? Lots of outreach. Okay, do lots of outreach. Done. Problem solved. Right? So it really isn't hard. And we need to flip this thing on its head. So let's say you have two options, two poles to choose from, right? You've got these two binary poles. Now, you're trying to figure out, like, you've got these two binary states, and you're like, well, which binary state should I abide by? Like, which one's right and which one's wrong? If you're uncertain as to what the right thing to do is, see if you can define what the wrong thing to do is. And once you've done that, you just have to invert wrong to then find right. This is a great trick for dealing with problems in reality, and it's a really awesome tool to use. So what we do is we invert by first asking our intuitive question. And then what we do is we ask the opposite of that question. So I'm going to give you a bunch of examples, so don't worry if this doesn't make sense for now, because the examples will give you a concrete sort of understanding. Let me give you some examples. So let's say your intuitive question, the problem is, what is the best niche? Like, you're not sure what the right niche is, and what the wrong niche is. You're kind of like, is it e-com, is it lead gen? Do I do this coaching or this consultant? Like, what's the best niche? What's the right niche to pick? Well, what's the worst niche? Right? So we invert best to find worst. So to answer the question, what's the best niche? Like, that's just, how the hell are you going to answer that one? Like, you just can't. But if you think about what the worst niche is, then you'll probably find that the worst niche would be no niche at all. So this shouldn't say two, this should actually say no. Let me correct that. But like, if you think about it, like, what's the worst niche? It's just not having one. Okay, and that's kind of, it takes a bit of critical thinking to arrive there, but you can realize eventually, like, okay, well, I know that if I don't have a niche, then I'm going to fail. So the worst niche would be no niche at all. And then, like, well, then you just ask yourself, like, okay, well, what's the opposite of no niche? And then you'd be like, well, the opposite of no niche would be picking one, but not only picking one, but actually sticking to it. So you'd then be like, well, okay, well, what's the best niche? And then you'd find out that the best niche is the one that you pick and stick to, right? So like the best niche is the one that you pick and then stick to for like 3 years, 2 years. That's the best niche. Niches in isolation, like they're not good or bad. It's just a question of like whether or not you stick with them for long enough to solve the problems associated with them, right? So it's kind of like, and the irony is that if there ever was like a best niche, then everybody would flood to it, and then it would no longer be the best niche. And that's what happens, right? Where like one person's like, oh my God, I made so much money in this niche. And then everyone goes over to the niche. And then like after a while, it's no longer the best niche. So like, let's look at another example. So let's say like you're wondering, you're like, I've just started my business. What service should I sell? Or I want to introduce a new service to my business. What service should I sell? Well, you'd invert that question, right? Because it's kind of like, well, what's the right service to sell and what's the wrong service to sell? So what service should I sell? What's the right thing? Well, then you'd basically invert sell. And you'd be like, well, what should I sell? And then you'd ask yourself, well, what does my niche want to buy? Now let's take this a step further. Because you might then be like, what does my niche want to buy? Well, I've got no idea. I still don't know what they want or what they want to buy. So you'd invert it again. You'd say, well, what does my niche not want to buy? And then the answer to that question is very simple. Like, what does someone not want to buy? Something that's a waste of money. And then you'd ask the question, okay, well, what's a waste of money to your niche? And then the answer would be, well, a service that doesn't help them, right? And then what you do is you'd produce like another question and be like, okay, well, what does help them? Because if something doesn't help someone, like what's the invert of that? How do we invert that? And then you'd be like, well, what does help them? And then you'd be like, well, I know what helps them. It's a service that solves a problem. And then you'd invert problem to be like, well, what solves a problem? And you'd find a solution. And then you'd be like, okay, a solution. So if we boil this down, what service should I sell? I should sell a solution. So you can't just like, dude, you can't just pick shit out of thin air. When it comes to critical thinking, you have to get back to first principles. And you arrive at these points through deliberation and elongated periods of like real strong thinking. It's hard and it takes time. But like, you can sort of see what I did there. So to answer the question of like, what do you sell? How the hell are you supposed to know what to sell? Like, you can't just like randomly, without loads of experience and understanding of a niche, just be like, yeah, I'm going to sell this, because you'll probably be wrong. You'll definitely be wrong because, well, you might not be wrong, but it's likely that you will pick the wrong thing to achieve the goal because you don't know what you're picking. So then you'd be like, well, what do I sell? Okay, what do people buy? I don't know what they buy. So what would someone not buy? Well, they wouldn't buy something that's a waste of money. Okay. Well, what would be a waste of money? So I know what they wouldn't buy. Well, they'd never buy something that doesn't help them. Okay. Well, what does it mean to help someone? What's the opposite of help? Like create a problem. Okay. What's the opposite of problem? It's solution. So they would buy a solution. So what should I sell? A solution. You can sort of see like it's such a fun thing to do. Like when you get good at this, like you can basically solve any problem and answer any question. And like, I'm at the point now where I kind of just do this algorithmically. I don't necessarily think it through. It will kind of just like, I could ask the question, then I'd have the answer like kind of just like comes out of my brain, because after a while of doing this, it will just ingrain itself into you. But you can see here, like we sort of arrived at the thing through the opposite of the thing. And so it's like a non-binary thing, because everyone's trying to think about what they should sell, but nobody's thinking about what the person actually wants to buy. Right? So we did this here. So let's give some more examples. So let's say you want to make yourself rich, and that's your goal. Well, you kind of want to make others rich, because when you make other people rich, then they love you and they pay you money, and then you get rich. So anyone that starts a business to make themselves rich will not get rich, because the way you get rich is through the complete opposite of making yourself rich, which is by making other people rich. So if you want to make money, you have to help other people make money. Now, it doesn't have to be making the money, because you can do other things other than marketing or business advice. But like, if you want to basically create value for yourself in the form of monetary gain, then you need to create value for other people. And like, a lot of people don't see that. They don't see that like the way they achieve what they want is through the opposite action, right? Because like the universe works on reciprocity and altruism. And it's through the opposite you get what you want. So I want to make money, like that's the thing. So like, let's say you want to make money. Well, what's the inverse flow of money? If we flip money on its head, like what's the opposite? Because if money flows in one direction, something must flow in the other direction. Like everything works in like a flow, right? One thing goes one way, one thing comes another way. It's opposite and equal reactions. And what's the inverse flow? Like if it goes the other way, well, it's value. So you don't start a business to make money. It's kind of stupid. If you start a business to add value, then you will make money, right? So it's kind of like with YouTube, if I want to get subscribers, then I don't necessarily want to get subscribers. I want to make content that helps people, and then people will subscribe. So you don't get what you want by focusing on what you want. It's kind of like the whole theme of this entire self-transcendence module has been like, if you want your goal, you don't get the goal. You don't go after the goal. You go after becoming the person that can achieve the goal. And it's through the inverted nature of that you get the goal, right? You kind of go after the opposite thing to get what you want. And let's say that you want to get a yes on your sales calls. I can tell you the secret to closing every single sales call you ever get. If you go into a sales call wanting to get a yes, it won't close. What you want to do is you want to go into your sales calls thinking, I don't want to get a no. Because if you don't get a no, then you'll get a yes. And if you just focus on, like, it's easy to like, well, it's much easier to get people to like not say no than it is to get them to say yes. So it's through the opposite that you can accomplish the result you want. Like my sales process is kind of just built and engineered to remove all obstacles of onboarding and just to give them no excuse to say no to the thing. Because if you do that through clever objection handling, the only answer is yes. Whereas if you just chase yes, then there's going to be loads of reasons you're leaving on the table for them to say no, right? So this is a secret to appointment booking. I'll lay it out for you. Let's say you want your prospect's time, right? So you want to book an appointment with a prospect. You want your prospect to give you their time. Well, you need to be worth their time. So don't focus on trying to book appointments. Focus on building something and building yourself to the point where you're worth people's time, right? So I'm at the point with YouTube and other systems where people come to us and they're like, please let me book a call, right? And the only reason they do that is because what we have is worth them doing that. People really misunderstand this. They go out thinking they need to book appointments. But what they need to do is create a business that makes people want to book appointments, right? You don't kind of make people book appointments. They will book their own appointments if they can see that you're doing value. Now, obviously, if you're doing cold outreach, like the intention is to get like the prospect's attention to get their time, but you still do that and you still want to bear in mind that like people are only going to talk to you if they think that you're worth talking to. And so don't focus on trying to get them to talk to you. Focus on trying to become worth it, and then it will happen anyway, right? It's inversion. And let's say that you generate leads and those leads don't book a call, right? So let's say that you've got a bunch of positive replies or a bunch of people that like, you know, are saying, yeah, I'm interested, but then none of them book a call, right? Well, why don't we try and invert it? Instead of you trying to get your leads to book a call with you, why don't you make it so that like your leads want to book a call with you? And that might sound really confusing, right? But you don't, okay, here's how, because this can get a bit confusing when you're trying to explain inversion. And I'm kind of tripping over my words here because it's not easy to articulate in case you can't tell. If you focus on building it so that your leads want to book a call with you, then your leads will book a call with you. But if you focus on trying to build something where you're just trying to get people to book a call with you, they won't. So you need to build it so they want to book the call, not because you want them to, but because they want to, right? So it's kind of inversion once again. Now, you obviously want to book a call with your leads, right? It's natural. You want that to happen. You want to book appointments. You want to close deals. But the only way you're going to do that is if they want to. So you should focus on making them want to, not focus on like you wanting them to. It is I know it gets a bit weird and it might sound like the same thing, but it's this subtle difference in language that will actually determine how successful you are with this. And let's say you want happy clients. Well, dude, just say, I don't want unhappy clients, because you know how to make a client unhappy, right? Like it's pretty obvious to determine and set a tone for client unhappiness. You know what could happen or what would have to happen for a client to turn around and ask for a refund. So instead of trying to focus on making your client as happy as possible, just focus on like trying to make them as not unhappy as possible, right? Because if you make them not unhappy, then they'll be happy. And it's much easier to make someone not unhappy, and it's much more obvious to do that than to try and make them happy. And let's say that you want freedom. Well, you need constraints. Freedom is achieved through constraint. So what happens is like people go and they start their business because they want freedom, right? They say, I'm doing this because I want freedom. And then when they get into their business, they realize, oh shit, like this isn't very free. So I'm not going to do freedom because like I'm not going to do business. I'm seeking freedom. So I'm not going to do business because I can't be free. I have to do all this work. And it's like, if you want to be free, then you need to impose constraints on yourself temporarily, because like freedom is a result of hard work. And like, building systems and building stuff so that you can just step back and not do anything. But you can't build those things and build freedom without first having constraint. It just doesn't work. So like when people hop into business and they want to be free and they find out that it requires some work, they're so polarized to free and they think that constraints are so wrong. So when they see they have to put constraints on themselves temporarily to achieve freedom, they give it up. But then they end up as not free. So it's through constraint that we achieve freedom, right? It's through the opposite of the thing that we actually achieve it. And, you know, if you want an easy life, then you need to have a hard life. So if you want to create a future that's easy and stress-free, then right now you need to go through hardship and stress. So it's through hard that we create easy. And if you want to feel smart or be smart, then you have to be stupid now. So, you know, if you want to be intelligent, then you have to temporarily be unintelligent. Because, like, if you start learning something new, you're going to be stupid at it and pretty idiotic, right? Which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being stupid because if you're learning, it's fine. But if you're polarized to thinking that being stupid or being unintelligent is wrong, then you'll never ever, every time you try and learn something new, you're always going to be like, no, that's wrong. It makes me feel like I'm an idiot. I'm not going to do it because no, I don't do that. I don't do learning. It makes me feel stupid. Stupid's wrong. Well, then you're only ever going to be stupid, right? Ironically. So it's through being stupid that you become smart, because you can't really learn something without first admitting you don't know anything. And if you think it's wrong to admit you don't know anything, then you're always going to know nothing. So you don't achieve smartness or intelligence by trying to focus on being smart and intelligent. You do it through focusing on trying to be stupid, right? So like it's really obvious when you can peel this back. And let's say that you want to be treated well by other people. Well, you need to treat others well, because you can't just sit there and ask people how to treat you. You have to treat them well, and they will then treat you well. Like human beings are reciprocal by nature. So if you want to be treated well, then you need to focus on the invert flow of being treated well, which is treating other people well. And if you want to feel confident in your body, then you need to feel unconfident in your body. So like a lot of people want to get in shape and they want to be fit and they want to be healthy. And then they find out that they have to go to the gym and they don't look great and they don't feel great. And there's people in the gym that look and feel great. And so they feel unconfident. And like, this is a big one in society at the moment. Like we've been polarized to believe that like you should love yourself and you should be comfortable with your skin. Like even if you're morbidly obese, you should still love how you look and stuff. And then like people go into the gym and they're like, oh, I don't feel good in the gym. I don't feel confident in the gym. And I'm polarized. Like confidence is always right. Like feeling unconfident, that's wrong because it makes me feel bad. And like my ego is so fucking fragile that if I feel bad, I think I'm going to fall apart. That's what most people that's what happens to most people, right? Kind of a bit of a subtle slip in there, Charlie. Sorry about that, guys. But like, you see my point. It's through feeling unconfident that you will become confident. Because if you go to the gym and you're in there and you think that it's wrong to feel a lack of confidence, then you're not going to go to the gym because you're like, I tried the gym and it's just not me. I think it's wrong because it makes me feel like I haven't got any confidence. You're a fucking idiot, right? You need to feel unconfident to build confidence. It's through, like, it's like pain and pleasure. How do you, like, if you want to create a life of meaning and pleasure, and like, I don't mean just like aimless pleasure. I mean like genuine, like pleasure that is a result of feeling like you've done something good and something meaningful. You have to go through pain. Like we know this. We've talked about this at length through these videos. But if you want something, you go through the opposite to accomplish it. And it's the fastest and easiest way to know what to do and know what is right to do. So if you're trying to do anything like book appointments or close clients or fix your mindset, it's kind of through the opposite. Like the easiest way to fix your mindset is to work, right? If you focus aimlessly, endlessly on mindset training and that's all you do, then you're kind of being an idiot, because the mindset training is here to help you do the work. And it's through the work that you can actually practice this stuff. If you just exist in theory and never practice, then you'll just be theoretical, and life isn't theoretical. Okay? And the problem occurs when someone wants something, but then they have to act out of accordance with it to get what they want. Because you always have to do that, right? If you want something, you have to go through its opposite to get it. And then we create this sort of trifecta, this gray area. And the right and objective thing to do is like a straight line. And the delusional and inaccurate judgment of human beings basically oscillates around it between two binary poles. So, sort of, as you've probably observed at this point, like you're becoming more aware to the fact that like human perception is pretty inaccurate and it's pretty delusional. And when you get like groupthink and lots of people in one big location or one big area or circumstance, like the prevailing bias of what the right or wrong thing to do is will oscillate around an objective truth. So I'm actually going to walk you through some examples of this as well, so I can continue to build on this understanding before we talk about solutions. So you'll see this graph on the screen. It might look familiar from earlier modules. Same graph, different principle. So don't bring the old principle into this one. So let's take an example here of what cold outreach method is actually going to work best, so we can further understand like why this whole binary thing is just so stupid. So in the like cold messaging or cold outreach space, like there used to be this prevailing bias, and there is again, right? Everyone thought that quantity was best. So everyone in the online business space was like, yes, you have to send quantity, like 500, 1,000 emails a day. The only way to make cold email work is to do huge volume, right? And then like over time, like huge volume stopped working because everybody started using huge volume, right? So like the best outreach method is the one that nobody's using, because if everyone uses it, it doesn't work. So like everyone gravitated towards quantity, and then they used it, and then and it stopped working. So then everyone was like, oh, quality. Yeah, quality is the way to go. Like send 5 emails a day, like send lengthy audits, and then that will work. And then like this happens, and then basically it bounces from one extreme to the other. And they're missing the point entirely, right? The best answer is non-binary and lies in the middle. Because like that's the objective truth, and that's what's truly going to work the best, is like a quality approach where you combine the strengths of quality and the strength of quantity, and you negate the weaknesses of both of those, and you do the thing in the middle, which is quality, which is to do a good, like a decent amount of volume with a decent amount of quality, right? Like you don't have any weakness there. But then what happens is like everyone then moves to quality, and then they go back. Another example of this recently is with sales, right? In the online business space, where everyone started using like really strong pressure-based selling, and like everyone's using like incentive-based pricing. Like, yeah, if you don't buy now, the price goes up. And then like everyone started using that, and then now it doesn't really work as well. If anything, it has the opposite effect, because like everyone's using it, and like everyone knows that everyone's lying. And so like everyone right now is using incentive-based pricing, when like in certain markets it works fine, but in a lot of markets it doesn't work anymore. But everyone still thinks it's right, and now the sales rates are going to drop, and then they're going to go like, oh, actually we should not use it. And then when everyone goes to not using it, then we'll go back to using it, right? So it's like, you know, you have to just constantly kind of go against the grain here and go against the crowd, because when you can learn to think like this and think in an idiosyncratic form, it works really well. And then like the best way to do it is to like sit in the middle. So if you think incentive-based pricing on sales calls is right, or it's wrong completely, then you're going to be wrong because you've picked a side, and then there's going to be circumstances where you don't have to use it. Or maybe you have an incentive that isn't based on price but something else. So you can still use an incentive, but it doesn't have to be the price. So you're not going from one extreme to the other. You see my point? Why can't we have both, right? So another example, sales style, right? Everyone used to think that like pressure and authority and incentive-based pricing was the way to go. Like one call closing, like pressure. I mean, I still like one call closing. If it doesn't work, like I'll drop it. There's no emotional attachment to it, but as far as I'm concerned, it still works. But like everyone's like, yeah, you have to put pressure on people, you have to claim authority, and you have to be like a dictator on the phone and aggressive. And then like everyone did that, and then it stopped working, and then everyone's now like, yeah, add value and give stuff for free and let them think about it and give audits, and like don't try and push them, let them make their own decision. And it's like both of these people are just, they really missed the point. They're both wrong, because the only way to be wrong is to pick a side, because there's going to be circumstances in sales where the one at the top is the right way to go, and there's going to be circumstances in prospects where the second one is the right way to go, right? Taken to an extreme, neither method will work as well as both methods combined. So why can't you have value and pressure? Why can't you have authority and like the prospect perceiving themselves to be in control? Why can't you have incentives and one call closing whilst also doing things like audits, right? You kind of have to think like critically about this and think, geez, why am I going from one extreme to the other? Why am I believing everybody else? Like you have to find a balance. The obvious one is USA politics, right? You can map this out on a graph. Like it's actually kind of sad at this point, like how obvious this is, right? So we went from George W. Bush to Barack Obama, and then like Barack Obama was really like political, very sort of presidential. He spoke well. He was very sort of careful with his words. And then like we had someone that was really careful and conservative with their image, and then it was so like careful and conservative that then it kind of created the complete opposite. So you'll learn this, like if you take something to its extreme, it will become its opposite through delusion and through like mass migration. And so then like we had Trump, who's like the polar opposite of Obama, and now we have Biden, who's like the polar opposite of Trump. And like I guarantee you in elections to come, the opposite of Biden will manifest. And we're just going to keep going between. It's so predictable. Human nature is just so bloody predictable. And it's kind of sad, but nobody seems to recognize the pattern. You know, maybe what's best for the country is a combination of both parties, right? Maybe we take the best of both worlds. Why can't we do that, right? So this is the nature of paradox. Anything taken to its extreme forces, anything taken to its extreme will become its opposite. So if you take a force to its extreme, like it will manifest the opposite. So like if you take, let's say you take discipline and work, if you take that to an extreme, then you'll be forced to face relaxation through burnout. Like you can't just work, you're not a machine, you can't just work and 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 not give yourself a break, because then you'll be faced to take a break, you'll be forced to, right? Literally your body will force you to take a break by probably putting you in the hospital, right? And I've had that happen to me, it's not very fun. You can't take shit to an extreme without being forced to face the opposite. If you take like someone who's really presidential and really careful, then the opposite will manifest. But then if you take someone that's really like out there and really outspoken and really wild and doesn't care, then the opposite will manifest. And it's kind of like we're just going to bounce between these extremes, and like polarizing forces, like they contradict themselves, but they will bring the opposite about. And paradoxes like this, they happen because like in the general big scheme, paradoxes like this happen because most humans base their beliefs on what other people believe. So we have this cascading positive feedback loop where if a group of people believe something, then more people will start believing it, and the more people that start believing it, the more people that start believing it, and the more people, and it just sort of cascades. And that's why we have these sort of like oscillations around an objective truth. And it's very rare. It happens with the stock market as well. So like the biggest indicator of the price of a stock is the price of a stock, because like how much it costs is how much people think it's worth. Now, how much a stock costs is pretty much never ever what it's actually truly worth in value terms. But like, you know, you'll see the price of a stock sort of oscillate, and very rare instances it will overlap between like what is actually objective and what is actually valued at. And it's very rare for a stock to truly be what it is actually worth, right? And so, you know, this is how it works. Like you're going to be sitting on either side of the pole, and you're going to pick the one, well, most people will pick the one that other people believe in, and it kind of just oscillates and goes like this. And so the more people believing in something, the more people are going to start believing in it. Now, here's a really interesting thing, because a lot of these political elections, because we can look at politics as a really clear-cut example, but it happens everywhere else, trust me. A lot of these political elections are usually won by like 1 or 2%. So like you might have 48% Democrat, like 52% Republican. It's never like a 70-30 split or like an 80-20 split unless you live in a dictatorship and they can like kill you if you don't vote. But like in a democratic society, there's always like a 50-50 divide. It's so interesting that like the numbers and the massive consciousness and the human psychology will perfectly balance itself out in that near perfect, where it's like you'll have like 49% or 51%, or it'll be like 49.7% and 49.3% will vote in a different direction. Like it's happened with Brexit in the UK. Like, should we leave or should we go right out of the EU? And like it nearly perfectly balanced it out. It was won by like a couple of 100,000 votes or something. And so like these things are really interesting to observe, because it's never like, nothing will ever go to such an extreme, because if it does, it will create its opposite. So when we find like consistent patterns like this, it's actually like we're achieving a lack of balance through a balance. So it's another non-binary thing. Like, it gets deep. I'm not going to go into that because it will take too long to explain, but you get the point. And this creates a bubble. So when everyone starts believing in something, a bubble is created. And when a bubble is created, everything gets so inaccurately subjective that reality kicks everyone in the teeth. So like if suddenly like 70 or 80% of people voted for Trump, then like that would be too extreme. So then like less people will vote for Trump. It's kind of just like how it works. And so this is what happened with the USA housing market, right? Like, you know, we got to 2006, 2007, and like everyone was so bullish on houses, like nobody thought the housing market would go down. And when everyone's like grouping around believing in something and it's taken to an extreme, you know that there's some real bad shit about to happen, right? And like it's really obvious. Like all you have to do is just look at what everyone believes, and you pretty much are seeing the wrong thing, right? And then this also happens with Bitcoin. So this is the graph for Bitcoin, and we can see that like in 2021 it kind of went on this like real bullish trend, like all the way up, and then we got like halfway through, and then like it dropped down, and then it kind of took a thing back up, and now it's dropped all the way down to like where it was when it started going up. And like it happens because of people's beliefs and people's perceptions. It's not actually to do with the value of Bitcoin at all. I mean, there's an element of that where certain people will be investing based on the underlying technology and stuff. And I don't know enough about Bitcoin investing to give you the intricacies. But like, I can tell you that if there's just a sudden crash, like there has been, as you can observe on the graph at the end here, it's because like of this like objective line and then also subjective delusion, where everyone's like, you know, if a few people think Bitcoin's not worth much, and then a lot of people start believing it, and then more people will start believing it, and then more people start believing it, and then like before you know it, Bitcoin crashes, and then like it gets to a certain low, and then everyone's like, oh yeah, Bitcoin's going to rally now. It's going to bounce, and then like a few people start believing it, and then more people start believing it, and then more people. It just goes like whoosh whoosh, and it just, these feedback loops are everywhere in human psychology. And you know, if a lot of people believe it, or if a lot of people are polarized to a certain end, then run, right? You need to learn to be idiosyncratic and observe events and polarities using your own analysis, independent of what the crowd thinks. And, you know, we know that the crowd looks like that on the Bitcoin graph, okay? So let's go through 30 examples. And in case you can't tell, we're in for a bit of a long video, right? Because this is the kind of topic that you can't just, like, I don't really want to cut corners with this. I want to give you the full range of everything. So I'm going to give you 30 examples, and then we're going to continue to talk about more non-binary terms. So confidence and doubt. Everyone, like, if you polarize yourself to having loads of confidence, then you're going to become cocky, and then you're going to think like nothing can touch you, and then when you think that, you're going to lose. Like, the way I look at this, and I'm going to explain like how I actually integrate these into my life as well. So I am extremely confident in my products. And I'm extremely confident in myself, but I'm also terrified. I have huge doubts about my abilities, and I doubt every day this product is good, because like I'm constantly terrified that our product sucks, and I'm constantly terrified that I suck. A lot of people are polarized to think that being scared and doubtful is wrong, and being confident and brave is right. But I have both, because I can sell this thing and I can deliver this thing knowing it's the best thing out there. But then I'm also absolutely petrified that at the same time, it could be the worst. And it's only by thinking it could be the worst that it is the best. So if I thought it was the worst, then I wouldn't sell it to anyone, and I'd just be terrified it's awful. And I wouldn't even put it out to the world because I'd be ashamed of it. But you need both. And I have both. And there are times where I'll have more doubt and more confidence. Like if I'm doing a sales call, like I'll just get rid of all my doubts. And then if I'm making program content, I'll be terrified it's awful. So like I'm making this video and I was like, yeah, I'll put a few examples in. And then I was like, no, I'm doubtful that's the right thing. I'm terrified. And then it's through that doubt that I now have the confidence to give you 30 examples, right? So aggressive and passive, right? If someone that's always like aggressive and walking over people will eventually walk over someone that doesn't like being walked over, and then they'll just stab them in the back, right? So if you're just aggressive, I think I spelled aggressive wrong there. Oh well. If you're always aggressive and you're always like pushing people around and bossing people around, then, well, eventually you're going to like really do some damage, or like you're probably not going to get very far like that. And likewise, if you're just really passive and you think that being like shy and passive and just letting it happen, then, well, it's also the wrong thing to do. So like in business, I can like aggressively grow the company, and on sales calls, I can be aggressive if I need to. And with my staff, I can be aggressive and quite forceful if I need to do something and they're making mistakes and I'm not going to tolerate it. Then at the same time, like if a team member makes a mistake, I might want them to try and solve it themselves. So I might be more passive and not actually take any action, right? It's having the judgment to know when to do either thing. So like if I'm on a sales call and I'm trying to handle someone's objection, I could either, like sometimes it'll be appropriate to be aggressive and sometimes it'll be appropriate to like let them handle their own objection. Or like if I'm following up on someone with cold email, like sometimes I'll be more aggressive in my tone, but then sometimes I'll play it more gently and be like, hey, I totally hear you. Let me know when you're ready, right? So you have to be able to read the situation, and there's no right or wrong ever. It's only right or wrong in accordance with the immediate circumstance and whether or not it helps you achieve a goal. And disciplined and lazy. So like I said before, if you're so disciplined all the time, then you will create laziness, because it's through extreme discipline that you create burnout, and burnout is just laziness, right? It's kind of forced laziness. And if you're like, for me, if I try and be extremely lazy, then I naturally create discipline because I can't tolerate the laziness anymore. And so like, I'll have times where like most of my day, I'm like 80% polarized towards discipline. Like the secret to this whole thing, mindset thing, is you don't want to take yourself to an absolute extreme of work ethic and discipline. Because if you do that too quickly, too soon, you will burn out and you will just get discouraged. The better thing to do is find a level of discipline that you can sustain for 40 years without burning out. And so like, I'm at the point now where like, I don't think being lazy is wrong, right? I think that being disciplined is right most of the time, but sometimes I need to be lazy. Sometimes I need to lounge around and be that guy on the couch just eating like cereal for lunch and just like watching a TV show and being a complete sloth. Because like, if I get rid of that completely, then I will invite it through the extreme of the opposite, right? So you need to have both. And it's not like you want to be lazy all the time, because that's obviously not going to get you anywhere. But sometimes, like, you know, you need to be lazy, and sometimes you need to do nothing, and sometimes you need to be undisciplined. So, you know, you can't polarize yourself. And uptight and relaxed. So if you're always chilled out and relaxed, then you won't get what you want. But if you're always uptight, then you're going to be as like tight as a string, and like you're going to really face some consequences. So it's kind of like people that are always uptight are wrong, and people that are always relaxed are right. Are wrong, sorry. You know, so you need to have both of them. And talking and doing. So people that always talk about doing and never doing anything. And like, you kind of want to always be doing and never talking, because, well, sometimes you want to talk, because if you do and then you don't talk, then you can't sell what you've done, right? So it's kind of pointless doing it if you can't share it. But like, if you want something to talk about, then do something. But like the worst thing ever, it's not the worst thing ever, like I think being shot in the chest is probably worse than this, right? Or drowning. But one of the worst things ever, right, is when you see someone talking about something but they've not done anything. Like, if you want to be a good talker and if you want to be a good like person to listen to, then you need to have done something. So the only reason people listen to me is because I've done this stuff. Like, if I was just talking about mindset and I was not practicing it, then I wouldn't be qualified to talk about it, and you'd probably know. So you need to do both. You can't just like lock yourself in and just do, because then you'll never articulate and explain what you've done. You'll never sell it and promote it, and it will never become like widespread. And rude and polite. So sometimes you need to be rude, and sometimes you need to be polite. If you're always polite, then people are going to be like, oh, he's just polite, I can get away with that. But if you're always rude, then people won't want to play with you, right? So it's kind of like, you know, I can be rude as hell. So like, if someone reaches out to me and I'm like, this is a stupid offer and I don't want anything to do with it, then I'll just tell them, right? And I'm not insulting them, I'm just insulting their work. And I'm giving them honest feedback. But then sometimes like, it makes sense to be more polite and not rude. So it's circumstantial. And talking and doing, we talked about this one. Oh, I'm going back here. Okay. So open-minded and stubborn. So sometimes you need to have an open mind, and sometimes you need to be open to ideas. But then other times you need to decide on an idea and not let anyone else tell you otherwise, right? So you need to know when to do which one. And if you're always emotional in business and you just run your business out of passion, then you're not going to end up making any money, because you'll just do everything for free because you feel sad or sorry for people. And likewise, if you're too rational or have no emotion, then you'll have no real drive or real like meaningful reason to work. So you need to have both. And like, if you're always serious and you're constantly like, you know, uptight and really like serious, then like no one's ever going to take you seriously, because they're going to be like, there's that person who always tries to be serious. The best way to be taken seriously is to get serious results and then be casual about it, right? So that's what I do. Like, you'll see me on YouTube in just t-shirts and shit, and like I'll swear, and you probably notice like I'm not really being particularly serious in these videos. I'm making the odd joke and stuff, but I'm talking about something serious, but I'm delivering it in a casual tone, and you kind of get your point across better. But there's all sorts of situations where you need to be both. And like, people that just think they can work smart or work hard. It's like, Charlie, why do you work so hard? Why don't you just go and sit on a beach if you're not read like the 4-hour work week? And I'm like, come on, man. Like, you have to do both. Like, why can't you work hard but then also be smart at the same time? Like, if you do both, then you're going to be good. And introverted and extroverted. If you're always shy, then no one's ever going to talk to you. And if you're always outgoing, no one will want to talk to you, because you're going to be like all in their face, always talking over them. So there's a time to be shy and reserved, and there's a time to be outgoing and loud, right? You have to be both. You're going to have a natural inclination to one or the other, but you need to be both. And clean and messy. So sometimes, like, if you want to clean up a mess, sometimes you have to leave a mess elsewhere to clean up a bigger mess. So like, if I'm working on my business and I'm really into like the stick of it, and I'm like working like 7 days a week, 12 hours a day to really get something across the line, and I'm trying to clean up something like this whole mindset module, for example, if I'm trying to like clean up loads of people's lives, then I'll leave mess in my environment, in my room and shit. Like, my room in my office is usually really tidy and orderly, but sometimes like I'll let it get messy if I'm having to clean somewhere else, right? Or sometimes like a bit of chaos allows you to think better and be more creative. And divergent and convergent. So divergent is where you're like you're spreading out your options, and convergent is where you're trying to sort of like pick an option, and you need to be both, and detail orientated and very visionary. So people think like, oh yeah, he's a detail person and he has great attention to detail, and then the other person's like, I'm big picture. You have to be both. You have to be big picture in terms of the overall vision of the company, and then you have to be detailed all the way down to the point where you can go and look at like, why is that comma there, or why have you missed out an exclamation mark on this part of the sales script, right? Got to be both, leader and follower. So like if you want to learn how to be a good leader, then you have to kind of follow good leaders, right? You need to be both. So sometimes you need to be a leader in your company, leading people. Then other times, like if someone knows more than you, or you want to know something from someone, then you have to follow them. So you have to do both. And specialists and generalists. So like if you just know like a lot about a little, then you're kind of screwed, because like that thing needs to integrate with other things. So if you're a surgeon, a brain surgeon, and you know everything about brain surgery, but nothing about anesthetic or timekeeping, then you're going to be fucked, because you're going to kill someone. Learning and teaching. So like the best way to become a teacher is by learning, right? And the best way to learn is by learning from a teacher. So you kind of need to have both. Like you want to be able to learn, but you also want to be able to teach. And so a lot of people just try and teach stuff without learning anything, and then they try and learn stuff, and the best way to learn is by teaching. So you have to do both. And if you just want to play in a team, then there's going to be a time where you have to become like a solo player, and you can't always operate in a team. So sometimes like a mindset module you have to do yourself. So if you're like, yeah, I can only do like team-based roles, I'm only ever good in a team, well then you're going to screw yourself when you have to do something that requires you to be a solo player, right? So if you just want to be a solo player all the time, then you're never going to build a team. And like if your goal is not to build like a big company, then that's fine. You can just be a solo player freelancer. But if you want to build something big, then you need to do both. And sometimes you need to be calm, and sometimes you need to have lots of energy. So like you can be bouncing off the walls and like on sales calls have loads of energy, but then sometimes you need to be really calm and collected. And like if you've got a team and they're all really crazy and they've all got loads of energy and you need them to be calm, then you need to be the person that's calm, so they all become calm. But if they're all really calm and laid back, then you need to go in there with energy. So you kind of need to like be both, have the ability to just be like, whoosh, I'm calm, whoosh, I've got energy, right? And sometimes you need to be firm, sometimes you need to be flexible. You can get the point, right? I'm going to go through the other one. So change and constant. So like with outreach or cold messaging or cold emailing, like people are fucking crazy. They always make changes to their stuff. Like they're never holding constants. So sometimes it makes sense to like make changes to your outreach, but very infrequently. So like you need to be able to just do the same thing over and over again to see what happens. But if you keep making changes, then you're kind of an idiot, because you're not giving the system enough time. But also if you always hold a constant, never make changes, then you're always going to fail, because you're never improving, and entropy will just claim you, right? And like realistic and unrealistic. So like you need to have like what's considered unrealistic goals. So like Steve Jobs with the iPhone, like everyone thought that was unrealistic. Or Elon Musk with like SpaceX. Everyone's like, get to Mars, that's unrealistic. But like Elon Musk is unrealistic in terms of his goal setting, but then he's realistic in terms of like actually getting to the goal. So he's like, his days are much more structured. And friendly and hostile. You can't just be hostile and you can't just be friendly. One of them's going to get people to hate you. One of them's going to get people to walk all over you. You have to be both. And consistent and inconsistent. So consistency is praised. I like consistency. But sometimes you have to be inconsistent. Like, dude, you have to go on holiday and take a break, right? That's inconsistency. Or sometimes like, maybe like I'll be making YouTube videos and then like I'll take a week off of YouTube to focus on building something more important and be consistent somewhere else. So sometimes you have to sacrifice consistency and be inconsistent to be consistent, right? You achieve one through the other. So these things have to be balanced. And if you always trust everyone, then you're going to get walked over and screwed around. And if you always don't trust anyone, then you'll never do anything. And if you're always going fast, then you're going to crash. And if you're always going slow, you're never going to go anywhere. So you need to be both. And this is a funny one. If you always feel comfortable and you're conscientious and you want to build a business, then you're going to feel uncomfortable. And like the best way to achieve comfort is through discomfort. So you want to become like a beast at eating discomfort. You always want to be uncomfortable. And then eventually you'll derive comfort from that situation. And like, you don't just want to be data driven. You also need to have intuitive spirit as well. So if all of your decisions are made purely out of data and purely analytical, then you're going to miss out on like having the advantage of like experience and human intuition. But likewise, if all you use is human intuition and no data, then you're screwed. So like when I make a decision, I'll look at the data, but then like if I'll kind of check in with my intuition and be like, what do you think? And then if it seems like it's got a strong argument that's valid, I'll analyze it. And likewise, if I think I'm going to make a decision like intuitively, impulsively, I'll be like, okay, well, let's actually see what the data says. And then if there's no data, I'm like, let's get some data. So, you know, working and playing. This is the worst one. Like, this is so fucking stupid, man. Like, people are like, I'm either working or I'm playing. Like, why can't you do both? Why can't, like, you need to construct it so that your work is play. Let that sink in for a second. Like, you need this to happen, right? You need to, like, this is what happens, by the way, for every one of these dichotomies when you transcend them, right? Not all of them. But why can't you achieve play through work? Like, when I'm building Imperium and creating these modules, like, yeah, it's hard work. And, like, it's a bit painful sometimes. But I love it. Like, it's, like, doing this is basically, like, I don't know, it's kind of like I'm having the time of my life. Like, I'm just having so much fun building these modules and building this business. And I would rather be here than doing anything else. Like, when you get to a point where you've got enough cash and enough money that you could technically fucking retire at a young age, but you don't, it's because you love the work. And so, like, I would rather be doing this than anything, basically, literally. And then the last one, binary and non-binary, right? So this is the ultimate one, because this is where people get stumped, because they really like struggle with this. Like, if you want to become non-binary, you also have to be binary. So if you want to achieve non-binary thinking, you also need to leave some room for binary thinking. Because if you're always non-binary and you're always like, oh, I'm going to sit in the middle, then you'll never take like firm stances, and it's through firm stances that results are sometimes accomplished. Because like, if you're like, I don't know, like, let's say for example, like, I don't know, should I be friendly or should I be hostile in this situation? Maybe it's time to be like, okay, well, I'm going to be hostile. And then you make the binary decision, but you use the non-binary like model to actually make that decision. And then like you come out of the hostility and you're like, okay, I'll be friendly this time. So like, it's kind of like you're constantly in this state of like non-binariness, but you also have the ability to be binary when you need to, because otherwise it doesn't work. If you're always like never ever taking sides, then you're always going to think that like not taking sides is wrong, and then you're basically being binary. So you're kind of achieving like this is like the primary example of achieving something through its opposite accidentally. So you need to have both and discover both. So what we're going to do now is discover some of your poles. So one of the things that sits in you is a personality, and this personality is really ruling your life. It's probably having like a very strong influence on your decisions and your actions, and a lot of your behavior will be filtered through your personality. What I'm going to do now is help you understand your personality. Obviously, we've done a lot of work on the self-image and the beliefs and the pain avoidance and everything, and that's great. But your personality is like a natural like force within you, and you can change it. It's malleable and it is entirely changeable, but you've got natural inclinations and natural ways of doing things, and I'm going to help you understand them. The purpose of this is not to help you. Well, we want to help you understand your personality, but we're not doing it so we can know who you are. We're knowing it so we can know who you're not, so we can become aware of your blind spots. So if you're, for example, really introverted, and we define that and discover that now, then we know that you're going to be missing extroversion. And so like it comes back to this inversion thing. Like part of this video now is to show you what the right thing to do is. And we've already discovered like inversion and non-binary thinking. So if I want to tell you what you need to be, I need to tell you what you already are. Because if you already are something, and if you already think something is right, and that's how you are, then you're immediately not something. And so if I want to help you build like non-binary habits and thinking, then I need to explain what you are so I can explain what you're not, and show you that like what you're not is what you need to get your goal. Because if you had both, then you'd have done both and you wouldn't be watching this training, right? So like it's kind of awesome. So you have binary poles, and chances are you're polarized in pretty much every area of your life. We need to, undo and unstick yourself. And it took me about 3 years to do this. So let's start this journey right now. So it really has taken me like 3, 4, 5 years to actually like think about non-binary thinking intuitively and like have it happen without having to try. Because initially you're going to have to try. You're going to be way more conscious of this stuff. It's going to tire you out. It's going to be exhausting. But when you form a pattern, it will work. So this is a big thing. Doing this and what I'm about to show you is going to massively move the needle for you, not only in your business, but also like actually in life. So let's start with a diagnosis. So this is a resource for you. and it's called Understanding Your Poles. So this is a pretty awesome resource that I put together, and this is going to help you understand your personality. And like, okay, personality is kind of like you have strengths and you have weaknesses, and like there's no standalone strength and no standalone weakness. What makes you strong in one circumstance will make you weak in another. So if you're introverted and the work you require to do right now requires you to just be sat in a room on your own, isolated, then introversion is an advantage. But then if the work requires you to be talking to people and outgoing, then introversion is a weakness. So there's no such thing as a good or a bad personality. There's just one that's more conducive to activities that actually help you accomplish the goal you're trying to accomplish. And you need to be comfortable basically being someone that you're not. And you need to basically be able to do this because like otherwise you're going to find that you're jammed. So this resource will help you get closer to understanding your current binary poles and current polarities. So personality tests. So below are 3 tests that you can use to better understand yourself, your personality, and where your binary poles currently lay. I would recommend you spend a long time understanding your results and answers. To know yourself is key. So I've spent years understanding myself and really getting to grips with who I am, and it's made me more money than, well, not money than I can imagine. I can imagine a lot more than a few million, but it's made me a decent amount of money, right? So this is step 1, personality tests, and then step 2 is polarizations. So once we've done the tests, we're going to do some analysis and some inversion to figure out what you're missing. So understand that, like, I'm not doing this. I'm not giving you and showing you your personality to tell you who you are. I'm doing it to tell you who you are not, so you can see who you need to become to achieve your goal, right? The worst thing with personality tests is people do them, and then they're just like, oh yeah, that's just me, or I knew that was me, and that's just how I am, and there's no point in trying to change because that's who I am. We know that's stupid. We've been through the training. But so the first personality test you want to do is your Myers-Briggs test. So this is an MBTI personality test. It's basically, if you click here, it will take you through to 16personalities.com, which is a really awesome test you can do. They've done 600 million tests, right? And if you go through here and you answer the questions, it will basically, you can see I've got my profile in here. I've done this myself. But if you take the test, it's basically agree or disagree answers for like a bunch of questions. It'll take you 10 minutes to do. But when you've done this, it will give you a 4-letter code. And that 4-letter code will tell you basically like who you are. And so you can see there's 16 different variables here. And when you finish, it will actually give you like some details as to like what your personality type is. The key is to read that, of course. But what you want to do is you then want to Google the complete opposite 4-letter code of what you are. And then you want to read about that, and it will seem alien to you. It will seem like wrong, and it will seem totally like the worst thing you could possibly imagine because you've polarized yourself to these 4 things. So when you read about someone who's the other 4 things, you'll think, how the hell could someone even exist like that? I promise they do. When you do that, then you know what you're not, and you can start becoming more non-binary, and you start becoming more familiar and no longer judging what you're not. Because if you're like an ISTP, right, and then like you suddenly become like an ENFJ, right, which is the polar opposite. Like if you look at an ENFJ as an ISTP, you will judge an ENFJ. You'll think those people are like, I can't stand them. They're way too like this, or they're way too that, or the way they do this is wrong. But you need to let go of those judgments because like if you're an ISTP, then an ENFJ is kind of like the polar opposite of you, and an ENFJ will have things that you don't. And likewise, you have things they don't. And so you need to have both, right? So do this personality test. I'd pause the video and do it now. I know this is a long one, but you know, it's kind of worth it. We're discovering you, right? Nothing more important than that. And then put your score here. So, you know, make a copy of this and then basically put which 4-letter code you are here. The next one is a DISC assessment. This basically assesses your personality from 4 different sort of like segments. So segment 1 is dominant. Segment 2 is influential. So dominant is like, this is kind of like based on your behavior. Like is your behavior like predominantly based on being like direct and disagreeable and trying to like control stuff. And then influential is kind of like, this is more sort of like when you're a people person, you're trying to sort of like influence people and you have fun like talking to people, you're very good at communicating, you can get quite emotional and quite impulsive. Compliant is you're more sort of like engineering based, you're more like sort of careful with what you do, you're more methodical. And then steady is just you're sort of stable, you're way more empathetic, you support, and you know there's these 4 things. So we need to figure out like whether you're a DI or a CS or like a CD or an SI or something. So if you go here to do your DISC personality test, you can click on this and you can watch, like there's nothing to watch, right? But if you click here, it will take you through a series of questions. And if you follow the instructions to tick like up or down, then what will happen is it will give you 2 letters. And you want to write down, it might give you 1 letter if you're really sort of like dominant in one area, not dominant, but dominant in an area. But sometimes it will give you 2 letters. So write down your score here. Once you've written down your score, you can research what it means to be that score. There's some explanations here. And obviously what we want to do again is we want to look at the opposite. So if you are a DC, like then you want to look at an IS and what an IS is like, or like an SI, right? Because then you'll be able to read the complete opposite of you. And you'll be like, that person's an idiot. There's no way I could be like that. That's wrong, but we need to let go of it. And then test 3 is the Big 5. So the Big 5 is a personality test that measures you on your neuroticism, which basically is like how like easily stressed you get and how sad you get. Then you've got openness, which is like how open you are, like how intellectually curious you are, creative and stuff. Conscientiousness is like based on like hard work and organization. Extroversion is based on like where you get your energy from, like humans or being by yourself. And agreeableness is like, do you trust people or do you want to be helpful, right? Or like, do you not want to be told what to do? So there's 2 of these. This is the free one. You can go through this. But the one I'd recommend you do is $10. And if you go to understandmyself.com and buy this, I'd recommend this one because it just gives you more of a, it gives you more of an insight into like the answers that you get, and you'll get more details. You can do either, but once you've done this, you want to write your score here. So if you do the $10 one, it will give you, like it will tell you what percentile you score. So like your 44, like your agreeableness is like 44%, like, you know, whatever. You want to write down your scores here. And if you want explanations, you can click here. Once again, like if you find you're really high in openness, then figure out what the opposite of openness is and research that and then try to integrate that into your life, because we need to do this. So polarizations. So what you want to do now is you want to list your scores from those 3 tests here. Okay, so do the test. So pause the video now and go and do it. Like, don't just be like, yeah, I'm going to do it later. Because if you won't do it later, just do it now, right? It's just stupid. Don't do it. You're not going to do it later. Because if you say you're going to do it later, like when's later? Like tonight? Well, tonight will roll around, you'll say you're going to do it tomorrow. So just do it now, right? Once you've listed these 3 scores, right, what you want to do is you want to write down the inverted scores here. So, like I said, if you're in like an ISTP, then you want to write down like the opposite of that, like an ES, E and whatever it will be. And then same with DISC, and then same with Big 5. Write the polar opposite of the thing that you are. Listed above are your blind spots. Chances are these are what you're lacking. Work to integrate them into your life, or at least start by stop judging them and accepting them into your life. So you probably find that like when you read the profiles of like the inverted part of you, you'll find there's some judgments and resentment. You'll think it's wrong, but you just have to recognize these as like emotions and your ego that you've built up over like, I don't know, like 20, 30, 40 years of conditioning, depending on how old you are. So when we try to undo these poles, like we've got to realize that we're trying to undo like decades of conditioning, depending on your age. And so like it takes a while to do that. So don't be afraid if you're met with like really strong resistance from your ego, because it can be overcome. Most people do these tests and simply think, oh, that's me. And then they lock in even harder, right? That's not the goal here. The goal is to understand every strength and understand that every strength brings a weakness. And if you want to win, you cannot afford weaknesses. So the objective here is like, we're not doing this to try and gain more strengths. We're trying to do the same thing by basically gaining less weaknesses, right? Because if you have a strength, then you have a weakness. So we want to have both strengths, and then we can't really have a weakness, right? And you have a personality, and you have natural inclinations to certain behaviors. So like, for example, I'm naturally introverted. So I will naturally lean towards introversion if I have the option. Like if my biases will be introverted. And like likewise, I'm kind of naturally more judgment based than perception based. But like, I don't judge people that are extroverted, and I have no problem like whizzing into an extroverted state if I need to. Like I make 3 YouTube videos a week. I did like 2,300 sales calls. Like I realized like if I really wanted to do this thing, I have to be both. And so now I literally am both. Like I'm naturally introverted, like when it comes to social situations, but then I also can do both and I don't have a problem with it. And so, you know, you need to stop judging the other side. You need to stop demonizing it and allow it into your life. You will eventually need it. So you might think, oh, I'm an introvert, but I don't need to be extroverted. Like the question you have to ask yourself right now is, do you want to mold your goal to yourself, or do you want to mold yourself to your goal? So if you mold your goal against your current personality, your current poles, and your current self, then your goal is limited by you. But if you mold yourself in accordance to your goal, then you are limited by your goal, and then you can set your goal to be anything, and then you have no limits. So you can stay introverted, or you can stay extroverted, or you can stay like analyzing, or you can stay judgment, or you can stay perceiving. You can stay it if you want to. I'm not telling you, you don't have to change, but you have to change if you want your goal, right? So you can either mold your goal to you, or you can mold yourself to your goal. And if you mold yourself to your goal, then yeah, I kind of just explain how that works. So this does not stop at personality tests, right? So I want you to now list below some of your main binary poles, and then list their opposite and start working by not judging them. So like list the sides you've got. So anything, right? We've talked about this at length now. I've given you 30 examples. We've gone through your personality. I've continuously layered in more examples of athletes and business people and all sorts of different like perspectives. Now I want you to basically label your sides. And you might be like, oh, I actually don't think I've got any. Like now I'm aware of this. I'm more non-binary. Like you're not, dude. No, right? You've been doing it for 2 hours, right? This shit takes you like 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 years. So like probably a bit longer. I probably haven't perfected it yet, right? And the irony is that I'll never perfect it, because if I think I've perfected it, then I'll stop trying. And that's like a binary thing, right? So I want you to go here and I want you to list your quote unquote sides. So this could be anything. It could be like, I am a vegan, or I am, I don't know, I like fake tanning, or this, or like it can be anything. Try to keep it more centralized to business, because we're going to try and move the needle on big things here. Like I have a tendency to be lazy, or I think it's wrong to work really hard. Like write down the side, and then write down the opposite of the side, and then look at the opposite, and you'll just notice that it's judgment based. So for example, maybe you've polarized yourself to believe the earth is round, right? Write down the opposite. I believe the earth is flat. Now, for the record, I believe the earth is round. I've done critical thinking on both sides, and I've come to a conclusion the earth is round, right? It's not flat. However, there's people out there that think the earth is flat, and like I entered their perspective and thought, okay, I'll listen to them, because if I don't, then like it's kind of wrong for me to not even think about it. And so like I'm looking at the opposite, and like you just want to, because you'll find like if you believe the earth is round, and I then say, why don't you go and look at flat earthers, then you'll find your ego will just not let you do that. So this is more like the flat earth thing. I don't believe the earth is flat, but like if you want to start to get to terms with how you've polarized yourself, go to extremes like diet or religion, or like something like that, or like something that challenges like a real core worldview you have. Like what's more of a strong worldview than how you view the actual like physical representation of the world, right? Find something really extreme like that you've tied your whole worldview and ego to, and then watch when you try and explore the opposite, watch how your ego and your paradigm try to preserve themselves. And it's trying to break through that and becoming aware of that we start to develop as a person and break through these things. So I've listed like 20 boxes, 19 boxes here that you can just go through. I try and fill them all out. You should be able to fill these out without any problem. You can go back through the examples I gave you earlier, but just list out like your sides and list out the opposite. And like if you can't figure out what your side is, like if you don't know what you like or what you hate, if you don't know what you like, love, or think is right, then just think about what you think is wrong, and you'll find what is right. So we can just apply inversion here once again. So, if you're like, I don't know what's right, I don't know what I think is right, I don't know what I believe in, then just look at what you don't believe in and start with the opposite, and then you'll find your side, right? Okay? So you might be wondering what my results are for these personality tests. So I am by nature an INTJ or an ENTJ. So like when I first started doing this, I was really introverted, and I've worked over time, and now when I do the test, it can kind of bounce between INTJ and ENTJ depending on like which month I do the test. So I do these tests pretty often, like every now and then, and like I'll find that sometimes I shift from a J to a P. I think it's quite rare for that to happen, but like sometimes I'll do the test and I'll be an INTJ, sometimes I'll be an INTP, sometimes I'll be an ENTJ, and sometimes I'll be like an ENTP. It kind of just shifts, but like it's because I've been able to balance these poles on some of these things to the point where I'm sort of like able to do both, that my identity can't really decide. Like my personality is like kind of both now. So I've merged them. So sometimes the results come out as like skewed, and most people look at that and think you've done the test wrong, but they don't understand. So this is my natural inclination personality wise. I've put it on the screen here. And then this is my sort of like, what would you call it? Like descriptions. So you'll see here a lot of like 60%. So when I first did my Myers-Briggs tests, my results were way different, right? Like I was way more like 90% thinking, 80% intuitive, and like my introversion was even higher, and I was even higher on assertiveness. And over time, I've kind of just worked to just slowly bring these ones down. Now, like if I need to flip back into like 90% introversion, I can. If I need to go back into like thinking at 90%, I can. But like I've been trying to like over the few years, like I've been so aware of this, and I've been so like close to the problem that I've now done it to the point, and I've been the other side so often because my goal has demanded it of me, that I've been able to just get myself down to these 60%. So when you do this, you'll probably find that you might have the odd like 50 or 60 or 40%, but like the goal isn't to get it to 50, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that's the perfect goal, but like I like to try and float like at this point down here, because if I'm floating at this point, I'm not polarized at any extreme. My assertiveness is like, I'm trying to work on this and trying to bring it down a bit, but it's not like I'm trying to like bring it down because I want to be less assertive. It's like my work requires me to usually be assertive. So it means I've been more assertive than I have not assertive, which means that my natural personality will be a result of the behavior that I've partaken in, as opposed to the other way around and flipping it. So yeah, it's pretty cool. And then my disc is DC, which means that dominance is my main trait, and then compliant. And then here's my big 5 results. So this is a bit of a contradiction here. Because I did this Big 5 test quite a while ago. I haven't done it, well, I've done it since, but I wanted to give you my results at the very beginning so that you can sort of see what I mean here, so see how this has changed. Because the Big 5 and MBTI will be slightly, they're different, they test for different things, but there's an overlap slightly. Because like if you're exceptionally low in agreeableness, then you're going to be exceptionally high in assertiveness. You can see how this works. So I did the Big 5 test a while ago, and I find that I was extremely low in agreeableness, and I retook it and I'm close to the middle, but I wanted to give you this example, like you can change. Conscientiousness, I score very high, which is cool. You can actually read the description of me here, basically. Neuroticism, sit in the middle. This means that like, I don't really get sad. I don't really get happy. Well, I do, obviously, but like I can control my emotional state. Openness is quite low, and then extroversion is moderately high. And you'll see here, like my extroversion's high on this test, but then my introversion's high on this test. So I'm kind of both. I don't want you to look at these and think that you want to try and aim to get my personality. That's not the objective here. Please don't think that's the objective, because there are different ways to do different things. But my point here is the objective should be to like find out who you are, then find out who you're not, and then become aware that who you're not may be required of you at some point. And when that happens, you need to remember like, oh, like I kind of need to be intuitive now, or I need to be like thinking now, right? So those are my results. Try not to model your personality off me. I don't really want people to replicate my brain, but you can see like this has got me where I am, and it's this philosophy that has led to it. So let's go back into the slides here. Okay. So you want to remember that the goal of this exercise is not to confirm who you are, it's to confirm who you are not, become aware of that, and then start integrating it into your life. And what you'll find is you've moved away from or judged or looked down on and demonized like certain parts of yourself or certain parts of other people. And that's kind of exactly what you need to grow. So it's really interesting, like what you judge and what you reject and demonize is exactly what you need. It's like pretty paradoxical. And you'll find that it's through the opposite that you achieve the thing. So pretty cool. So let's talk briefly about non-binary identity sliders. Because now that we've defined facets of your identity and personality, we need to try and figure out how to like sort of traverse like these different states. So most people view themselves as static, definitive, determined beings. They see themselves and their poles as right and the opposite as wrong. If you want to be successful, you cannot afford this. And the demand of success. You want to become attached to your goal, not identity characteristics, ideology, or polar states. If your goal requires you to be what you are naturally not inclined to be, it doesn't matter. Your goal will not adapt to you. You must adapt to your goal. So it's like I said earlier, like you can either choose your goal because of who you are, or you can choose who you are because of your goal. And the latter is much more better and it's much more fun. Now, it doesn't have to be that way, but that's how I see it. And you want to release attachment. So right now, your ego has become attached to extremes. You must let these go. What are they, right? What are these extremes? What, like, I'm an introvert. Like, what is it? Well, they are arbitrary vehicles of emotional attachment that do nothing but give you a false sense of meaning and tangibility in your life. You must release attachment to your binary poles, both in identity and personality, and your worldview. You must let go, and you must analyze why. Like if you analyze like why you love what you love, or why you are who you are, or why you hate what you hate, or why you aren't who you aren't, you'll find nothing but accidental conditioning manifesting from random events. Now, there's arguments in psychology that personality is an innate, determined thing. And like, I think that's true to a degree. But I think the ability to actually change it is way more powerful, right? And that's what I believe in. And it served me well so far. So yeah, man, like let go of these poles you've got. Like, what are they? They don't like, they just make you feel like you are something. They give you this sense of like tangibility. But my consciousness is not a set of binary poles. My consciousness is like floating between all the poles at once, and I can just like whiz it across at any point in given time. And by doing that, I can rapidly adapt and change, and I can become whoever I need to be or whatever I need to be to get the job done. And like there are certain caveats to this, because like I'd never compromise my integrity. So like if my goal was to make $1 million, I could go and like rob a bank and then maybe get away with it. But like I don't want to do it by being a bad person. So like you still want to have like rules, and you still want to have like a sense of moral code. And I don't mean to tell you that you want to get rid of like right and wrong from a moral perspective, because that would be fucked, right? And that would probably lead you down a really bad negative path. You'll have your moral code, and you know what's right and you know what's wrong from like the perspective of like morality. You don't necessarily want to shed yourself of that, because well, that's a code that you live by that keeps your place in this world pretty orderly and makes you feel good about yourself. But everything else, chuck it out. So I want to propose you see yourself and things on a slider. So I want you to imagine for a second, we've got this slider of introverted and extroverted, and like you will naturally default to a certain side on most things. You just will. You're going to have biases. It's impossible to not have biases. So you will naturally drift to a certain side. So for example, I naturally drift to introversion, or I naturally drift to judgment, right? But then I have the ability to pull myself out. You need to be able to slide between both, and you need to be able to slide between poles according to the situation and context and circumstance. Now, I don't want you to think that this means that you have to go from this side all the way to this side, right? This is a spectrum. You can be anywhere on this. So sometimes you might have to be like, you might be in a situation that requires you to be like 60% introverted, right? I'm not saying like you're either going to be this really, really shy, quiet person that talks to no one and has never said a word in his life, to someone who's doing public speaking to 1 million people. Like, you kind of want to be like, okay, well, how much introversion do I need? I'm going to dial it down to this level. Or like, actually, I don't need much. I need to sort of be in the middle, just a little bit introverted. Or like, okay, I actually need to be like sort of mid between like extroverted and like 75% extroverted. And you want to imagine this is like 0, right? And then you've got the plus in this direction. So this would be like 100%, and this would be like minus 100%. And so if you're measuring yourself against like extroversion, this is 100, this is minus 100. So, you know, you need to be able to go like, I'm not saying you go from here and then like extrovert all the way over here. It's kind of like, okay, here. Or because if you go from here to here, then that's a binary state. You think you have to go from one extreme to the other, right? That's a binary, like you're trying to achieve non-binary thinking through binary thinking, and like it doesn't really work that well. So there are situations where you might have to be like really extreme, right? But most of the time you're going to be chilling like maybe here, or maybe like here, and then maybe over here. So like on the introvert extrovert scale, I might naturally sit like here, maybe. Like, you know, I'm sort of like, I still like having friends and going out and seeing people. I'm not like here where I'm a complete loner and want to live in the forest, but like, you know, I'm kind of here, but then I can go wherever, right? So that's sort of how this thing works. You need to have these identity sliders. You know, if this person here is like polarized to like near enough 90% introversion, and they have to do sales calls to win a business, then they better be able to dial up that slider and temporarily change and morph into someone that can and enjoy sales calls. It's like, you know, if you think you enjoy sales calls or don't enjoy sales calls, it's a slider. You need to be like, well, I enjoy sales calls, right? And you're not going to delude yourself and lie to yourself, because there is going to be stuff that you don't enjoy, but you need to be able to do it regardless, and that's the point. So another example is like Charlie, like how many hours do you work, or how long do you work, or like how hard do you work? And like, you know, if I'm in the middle of like an extreme recording session like this mindset module, I'll be like here on monk mode. I'll be like sleeping perfectly, eating perfectly. I'll be exercising routinely. And then I'll be like 12 hours a day, like real focused work, like taking no shit from anything, no distractions, no nothing except from work, right? And like I can sit in this state for quite a while. I've trained myself to sit here for a long, long time if I need to. But like if I sit here for too long, then I kind of like, for as long as I sit here, like it's kind of a balance, and then I'll like fall back here because I'll burn myself out to a point where I have to spend like a few weeks literally just like in bed. I've had it before where like I entered monk mode and I did it for like 6 months straight. Like, and I don't mean like monk mode, like, yeah, I'm just working hard. Like, I mean, like it was actually like, I didn't talk to anyone or do anything for 6 months. It was a great way to get shit done. And I got a lot of stuff done initially in my early days, but then I literally had to spend like, you know, basically 6 months recovering from that. So I kind of ended up, my average was kind of like here. So like if you go here like half the time and then here half the time, you might as well just sit here, right? So like now I kind of sit like here, right? Where like I'm not quite at that extreme of monk mode or like extreme work or extreme discipline, because if I do that, I know where I end up. But I'm kind of just like chilling here, like halfway between like 0% sloth mode and like 100% monk mode. And like sometimes, dude, like if I get to this point and I've been doing this for like, you know, like 6 months and I really start to feel like I'm tired and burned out, then I'll go and chill out here for a bit, right? And I'll have like a few days of work, like a week where I don't do as much, and then like I kind of just take off like some evenings and like go and chill out and relax, and then like I'll kind of be like, okay, I'm just gonna climb back up, and then I'll sit here, and then I'll come back to it. So I'm kind of just sliding. I'm mostly always here, but then sometimes I'll have to come like here and just like chill out for a bit, and then like there's nothing wrong with this. And like if you wake up one day, now this is the problem with this is exercising judgment, which we're going to talk about in a minute, because like if you're not careful, you'll think you're burned out because your body will tell you you're burned out. It will be a resistance manifestation. So like your body might be like, oh, well, we've been in monk mode for like 2 weeks now and we're really burned out and we're really stressed and we're really like feeling tired and stuff, and like we need to stop. But like you need to be able to differentiate between true, genuine, like biological burnout and your body trying to convince you to do the less painful thing because your current sense of self doesn't want to grow, right? So you need to learn to differentiate. But you know, my point here is you can replace this with anything and this with the opposite of anything, and you just need to be able to be like, vroom, 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 vroom. So like I will naturally lean towards monk mode, but I have no problem like one day or 1 week just deciding to be more slovenly, because like it's kind of healthy to do both. It's kind of like with healthy eating. Like if you just eat healthy food all the time, constantly, forever, and you're at this extreme, then you'll actually become unhealthy, because studies show, you can ask anyone that studies nutrition, that like your body kind of needs to be shocked a little bit. It needs to be reminded of like the bad times, right? And you still need like fats and sugars and oils and like salts and stuff to keep yourself going. And like you kind of stop appreciating healthy food if you don't eat unhealthy food. So you need both. So sometimes you want to be like really healthy, and then like maybe one day of the week you're like really unhealthy, and then like you come back in. So finding a balance is pretty key. Now there is stuff like this that I've cut out completely. So for example, like alcohol, right? Right, so like if I put this in, I don't drink any alcohol at all, ever. Like, but sometimes I'll have a beer, so I might be like here, right? Maybe I'll be like, yeah, I'm gonna chill out and have like a glass of wine with some dinner, or like I'm going to like, I don't know, like I'm going out or something, and then like I'm having a beer. But like I'm never really going beyond this point with alcohol, and then I'm usually almost always here. And like I have no problem with this, because like I can take no alcohol to an extreme, and I don't really want alcohol. It doesn't affect me. It affects me if I drink it, but being at the point where I drink nothing doesn't really matter to me. So, you know, slider, everything in life, you need to be able to sort of see yourself. Okay, you know when you build a video game character at the start, like on Sims or something? In fact, let me pull this up, right? So let's see, Sims creates a character, sliders, right? So when you create a character on a video game like Sims, I don't know if you can do this. Let's see. This is just a completely tangential example. So here you go, look. So when you create your character on a video game like this, and you're creating your quote unquote yourself on Sims, you can sort of like drag these sliders to be like how you want them to be. The problem is that people create their character and then the game doesn't give them like it doesn't give them an opportunity to change the slider again, which is pretty sad. But like this is how you want to see your life: is you want to have a load of sliders, and then you want to be able to sort of like whoop, 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 and just like move them up and down, according to the situation and the circumstance. And you can see there's some ones here, like, so like, you know, you've got all of these sliders. You just be like, boop, 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 boop. Okay. So that's how I do it. And it served me really well. And I hope it serves you well as well. So like another one would be mindset work and actual work. So like right now you might be like polarized into mindset, but then you should polarize yourself back into actual work. And then like what will happen, I guarantee you, if you do actual work for long enough without paying any attention to mindset, then your work will start to suffer and you'll need to come back to the mindset training. So like I kind of, if you're wondering where I sit like kind of like here, maybe like here in the middle of both of these, like the middle and the end, where like I'm kind of like always working on my mindset, but most of my time is going into my actual work, because I can, like, by working properly, I'm working on my mindset, because your work becomes a vehicle to improve your mindset. And it takes years to do this, but it's possible. And you need to have good judgment. So like to pick what's right and to pick what's wrong, you need to know like what is right and what is wrong, because it's kind of hard to do that. So what I'm going to do now is actually tell you, like, well, your question might be like, Charlie, okay, well, I know I need to like have these sliders and like change my personality and like change myself and change what I believe to be true depending on different situations. But like, okay, how? So like, for example, with cold email, like quality and quantity, like how do I know like if I should send more quality, or how do I know I should send more quantity? Or like sales calls, like how do I know if I should be more aggressive or not aggressive? Or how do I know if I should ask this question or this question? I don't want you to think that these black and white balls just represent your identity and personality. They also represent every facet of reality that you engage in, right? So everything else alongside your identity is also going to be embedded into this. And it's a question of knowing what is right and what is wrong. And it's usually a question of doing what's in the middle. So I'll give you an example here really quickly. I actually had this issue recently, right? Let's just pop this in here and this in here. So it's going to sound a bit random, but it's just an example to give you an idea of how I think. So every day I used to drink protein shake, right? And after drinking a protein shake, it would make me feel horrible. I'd always feel really sluggish and like I couldn't concentrate. And so I was like, I'm going to get rid of this protein shake. And then I was like, well, part of my life goal is to become fit and healthy and bigger. So if I do this, then I sacrifice that. So now I'm kind of in the middle where I have like half of my protein shake like one time and the other half 6 hours later. And that way, like, I don't really feel bad because it's only half of what I would usually have. So it's not enough to push my biology over a threshold to make me feel shit. But I also get both by splitting it 6 hours apart, but just I don't have the downside. So that's like an example of like, one person might look at one thing and then be like, I'll get rid of it. Or they might be like, oh, but I still need it. So then they carry on doing the thing, but it's like, you can kind of just do both, right? So, yeah, it's just a random example I thought of, but like, you'll eventually get very good at this once you've, like, I would just suggest you watch this video like 100 times. And I'm not even actually exaggerating there. Like, I've watched videos on non-binary thinking, God knows how many times, like 300 times probably, like for a year when I was running. Like, I'd usually listen to the same video. So like, you need to have like real awareness of this, because like this is the next thing for you to master beyond your identity and personality and sense of self, is this ability to think. So yeah. So let's talk about exercising judgment, because now we need to know, like, okay, so we've talked about like what is right and what is wrong. And we've talked about like how you can't really be like, if you think something's right, then it's immediately wrong, because the only way to really be wrong is pick a side, right? So you just don't ever want to pick a side, but you want to be able to pick sides because you don't want to be completely like non-binary. You need to still be binary, but like, it's a question of like, you pick the side depending on the circumstance, and the circumstance will predict what is right and what is wrong. So if you are picking one thing in one circumstance and then you pick the same thing in another, it doesn't mean it will be right in another circumstance. Like, everything depends on context and everything depends on the environment. So I might advise one client to do quality-based cold emails, and then I might advise another client to do quantity-based cold emails. And then someone might be like, well, hang on, you told him to do that and him to do that. And I'll be like, yeah. And it's like, well, what do you mean? Well, how can you advise both of those things? And I'm like, because of the context. People really overlook the context, and they just try and apply the same black and white thinking or the same model to everything they do in life. And that's really where the pain and the mistakes come. It's like when something's working and then you apply the same thing to something else and it doesn't work, and you're like, why did it not work? It must be broken. It's like, no, you're just being an idiot, right? So exercising judgment is a really important skill to have, because otherwise you're going to be wrong more often than you're right. And how easy it is to achieve success is going to be like dependent on that, right? So how do you know when to be what or when to do what? Judgment, right? Exercising judgment is using your brain to decide when to be what or when to do what. It's looking at a situation, a circumstance or environment, and knowing what is required of you so you can shift into it. And it takes some time to develop, but once you have your judgment nailed, you can move forward consistently without any mistakes. So let's say, for example, I'm going to give you some examples of judgment, right? So let's say you find yourself in a situation where a client is being difficult and pushing you around. And let's say you naturally would lean towards being agreeable because you're high in agreeableness. You've polarized yourself to believe that disagreeableness is wrong and agreeableness is right, and you don't like conflict. Now, exercising judgment here would be analyzing the situation, which eventually will happen in seconds like an algorithm once you train yourself. But you analyze the situation and then you decide that you need to dial up disagreeableness in basically order to avoid the client pushing you around and to gain the client's respect. So like you might be an agreeable person put into a situation where you need to be disagreeable, and you analyze it and you quickly flip to disagreeableness. And by doing so, the client respects you, pays you, and then doesn't fuck you around anymore. And then you flip back to your natural state of agreeableness so you feel more comfortable with your existence. Right, that's one example of exercising judgment. Another example, let's say you're on a sales call with a hardened, emotionless, multi-seven-figure business owner, and they don't take kindly to questions about their personal life. Now, exercising judgment here would be realizing your usual method of putting the prospect in an emotional state will have the opposite effect it does on 90% of your prospects. So you look at the situation and you're like, okay, well, I always ask these questions, but this person, oh God, they're not responding properly. It's like, okay, well, don't panic. Just dial down the emotional part of your sales process and dial up the analytical part, right? So it's like every process has the opposite. So, you know, if you're on a call and you always ask emotional questions and then like you have a call and it's not appropriate to do it, then don't ask the emotional questions. Now, a caveat to this is not, it should be the exception, not the rule. So like you should ask the emotional questions all the time, except from when it's not appropriate to. So sometimes like maybe 10% of your calls, you don't need to ask them, right? Another example, let's say I'm coaching a client on appointment booking, and let's say they're a week in and they haven't got any results, and they're emotional and upset that things aren't working. Now, for most clients who get emotional after a few weeks of no results, I take an empathetic stance to solve the problem. I'd be like, okay, well, I hear you, let's talk about this. But in this case, if they're a week in and they're getting emotional, I dial down the empathy and I dial up the apathy, and I tell them to knuckle down, stop listening to their stupid thoughts, and let the test run. And this confuses people. Because on coaching calls, someone might come to me with a problem, and I'll handle it with a completely different mannerism and method to another problem. And then they're like, well, Charlie, like, how do you... That makes no sense, because you told John this, and now you're telling Steve this, and now you've told me this. And you've told us to do completely different things, and you've treated us in completely different ways. And then I'm like, are you guys the same person? Like all three of you in the exact same situation, with the same context, with the same circumstance, with the same psychological makeup? Well, no. It's like, well, then why would I treat you guys the same? Right? You have to stop overextending things, and you have to stop trying to apply rigid rules and principles to everything in your life. There's a quote from Charlie Munger that says, to the man with a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. So if the only tool you have to fix anything is a hammer, you will use a hammer to try and fix the thing. So if you're trying to wrench like a screw into like a wooden board and you only have a hammer, then you'll see the wrench task as a hammer task. And you'll try and hammer the screw into the board and it will probably break the board. And then you'll be like, oh, that's just stupid. This hammer is broken. It's just idiotic thinking. But that's literally how this thing works. So how to actually exercise judgment? So this should say, how do I exercise judgment, right? Another example of non-binary thinking, right? So you might notice that I make some spelling mistakes, or sometimes I might trip up on my speech in these videos, right? And it's like, if I basically looked over and ruthlessly analyzed every single word in these like 2 to 3 hour long slideshow presentations, then I wouldn't be able to record them quickly, right? And I wouldn't be able to get them out to you. I'd spend like hours and ages and days and weeks on every little detail. It's like I'm detail orientated with these slides, but I also have the ability to like oversee little mistakes sometimes, so I'm not being a perfectionist. Because like if you're a perfectionist and you're polarized towards perfection, then you're going to do shit really slowly. But it's like you want to have perfectionism and you want near enough everything to be good and perfect, but you also want to have the ability to accept the fact that everything will be. So just another example, right? In case you're wondering like, oh, you spelt it wrong. Like, so what? You know? So let's talk about how I actually exercise judgment to know what is right and what is wrong. Because I handle different things in different ways. and I use different models and different polarizations, and I take myself to different extremes, and I balance myself on different sliders depending on the situation. So I exercise judgment now without thinking. It's intuitive, paradoxically, right? However, I had to work to develop this in the earlier days of my business career, and I had to think through situations before approaching them. So I've actually defined, like, I wasn't going to do this because it took, like, it would have taken too long to do, but then I realized, like, I need to give it to you. So it took me a long time to do this, but I actually sort of like broke down my unconscious process of judging situations into 5 steps. So step 1 is to define the objective. So if you're in a situation and you're aware that there's multiple ways to handle it because you're a non-binary person now, and you've got the ability to think in grades as opposed to, like, you can think in the gradient, not in the actually black and white. Like, the first thing to do is to define the objective. So I start off by asking myself, what's my goal? Right? What's the goal in general? And then what is the goal in this situation? So I'll ask myself what I'm trying to accomplish. And if I don't know what I'm trying to accomplish in the situation, then I will ask myself what my goal would want me to do. And it helps me to see what I should do, because you want to kind of like see your goal as a person, and like you have to, if you're not sure what to do in a situation or what you're trying to achieve in a situation, then your goal, you kind of ask your goal, like, hey goal, what do I need to do in this situation to make you come to life? And then your goal will be like, you need to get this outcome. And then like the outcome's possible to get, you just need to make sure you use the right tool, right? So that's the first thing I do in any situation. Like, my goal is to make client acquisition easy. That's like my North Star for this company. So every interaction and every time I'm in a situation, I bear that in mind. I'm like, okay, right goal. We want to make client acquisition easy. So what do I need to achieve in this specific circumstance to take us closer to that? Right? So that's the first thing, is to find the objective. Because if you don't know what you're trying to achieve out of the situation, then fuck man, you're not going to do anything. You're going to make it's kind of 50-50. If anything, it's like 50 to like 100, because you've got no idea how many variables could come as a thing. So I want the closest thing. By the way, if you can't figure out what you're trying to achieve in the situation, you probably shouldn't even be in a situation. So if you're kind of like, do I want this or do I want this? Like, I don't know. What would my goal want? My goal doesn't want anything from this. Oh shit, then why am I doing it? So I had a client the other day, and he was like, Charlie, I'm really struggling with this done for you client I've got, because they're this really weird client and they don't pay me anything, but they say they're going to pay me when it works. And like, I've been working with them for like 3 months and it's not working, and they're really having a go at me, but I want it to work. And I'm like, well, what's your goal? And he's like, well, I want to build like a 30 grand a month, like, business. And I'm like, okay, well, the objective in this situation should be to get rid of that client. So he was trying to fix the client's problem, but I was like, we need to get rid of the client. So you need to basically think in both terms. So objective, and once you've got the objective, you want to do what I call preference detachment. So once you've defined your objective, which will be defined by your goal, you want to remove preferences you have to basically like how you naturally want or would handle the situation. So you'll naturally want to handle the situation in a certain way, depending on your psychological makeup and your conditioning. It doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. So it doesn't matter how you want to handle it or how you would handle it. It matters how you need to handle it in order to achieve your objective set forth in step 1. So you've got your objective, and what you do next, and like what you think is the right thing to do, or the right thing to pick, or the right side to choose, is going to depend on like the objective. And you remove your preferences, like your personal preference. The goal should set the preference for the action or what is right, not you. Unless, of course, it's kind of like, do I kill this person, right? And it's probably wrong to do that, no matter what it says about your goal, because like my goal will always be to achieve my goal, but to maintain integrity and to be a good person, right? Otherwise, you're kind of just doing it for the wrong reasons, from my perspective. The next thing is emotional detachment. So define objective, right? Detach yourself from your preference of handling the situation, and then detach yourself from any emotion. So you want to remove or try to remove all emotional baggage or feelings that are coming with this situation or circumstance. And you want to achieve a calm state so you can see clearer. So now what you want to do is you want to remove all emotion. So if you feel sad, happy, angry, like calm, calm is the objective we want to achieve. But if you feel really calm and really relaxed, that's an emotion. So you kind of don't want to have any emotional state about this thing and this situation. which is why it's so easy to help someone from the third person, by the way. It's like, it's much easier to help someone else than to help yourself, because like you're more emotional about yourself. But the best thing to do is just to be not emotional about the situation for yourself, and then you can win, right? But the third person is the fourth step. So once you've defined the objective, removed any attachment you have to your preference to handle it, and you've basically like become aware of how you shouldn't handle it by removing how you want to handle it. Now, sometimes how you want to handle it will be the right way to handle it, because sometimes you're going to be right. Like if it's a 50-50 thing, then you're going to be right 50% of the time. But it helps to detach in the first place and remove any attachment to that preference, because then you can see more rationally. And when you remove the emotion as step 3, then you can really see things clearly. But then step 4 is to enter the third person and ask yourself, this is a great question, what advice would you give to someone trying to achieve this objective in this circumstance? How would you tell them to behave if you had no idea about their natural inclinations or what they wanted to do? And the key to this is to not let this third person perspective be biased by your preference, right? So you need to not only watch yourself, but then watch the person watching you. So it's a bit of a paradox. But once you've removed the emotion and once you've removed the preference, you should be able to see yourself in a clear enough way. And then you can basically imagine that you don't know yourself and you're telling yourself how you think you should behave without any bias, right? It's hard to do, but you need to do it. And then behave. So number 5 is obviously to dial up or dial down what needs to be dialed up or down, or, you know, pick a side or, you know, switch sides, and then let that switching or let that dialing manifest into behavior, and then make the decision. Now, this 5-step process eventually will happen instantly, but like this is a really important lesson in like critical thinking and decision making and knowing what to do. And like it kind of, when you know this, it just feels like the whole world opens up to you basically. So finally, we're going to talk about spectrum thinking, because we've talked a lot about like everything non-binary thinking wise, but I want to just round it off with one more model to perceive and see like binary poles, just so it can become a lot clearer to you. So reality presents itself on a gradient, but it kind of doesn't. Like if we could see reality for what it truly was, we'd see a gradient, we'd see like shades, right? I mean shades like this, right? But binary thinking works by reducing reality from this into 2 clearly defined states like this. It's easier for us to do this, right? We've discussed this, but like you kind of, this is how reality would look, but this is how humans see it. So what we see is not what is there. Obviously, like I said, we see like what we are, not what is there, right? So we talked about that in the paradigm section. It's all sort of interrelated here. But, you know, the problem with this is that like when we think in binary terms, right, we see black and white. What we can see here is we can see 2 shades, one of which is dark black and one of which we could potentially consider light black. And then the problem with this, again, is that these 2 shades are quite similar. So we've got light black and then like light white, kind of like light grays, but like this one in here would still be considered black because it's on the black side. And then likewise, like over here, we've got like really bright white and then like light white, but like we miss out on these little details. So when we think in binary terms and we basically give ourselves 2 options, we limit like seeing like 4 potential separate things. And like, you know, these are the same thing. They're quite similar in shade. But if we're looking at them and we just see black and white, we're not going to see how black and white or how similar they are. We're just going to see that they're 2 completely separate things and they're more alike than they are different. So we're going to miss these details. And obviously like the whole black and white thing is the easiest metaphor to use here, but this applies to everything, right? The uniqueness of each shade is lost in the binary way of thinking, and you're more likely to perceive what isn't there and miss details. So like life is like, success is about options, and it's about seeing options and seeing avenues and methods of behavior that nobody else sees. And I can tell you now that the people that do the best, the people that make the most money and have the most fun in business are the ones that perceive and see options and perceive and see like shades of reality that other people's binary thinking does not allow them to see. Like if you take all of our outreach systems or our sales systems or this mindset system, like I'm able to see shit that other people can't see. And it's because of this. It's because I don't subject my reality or my sense of reality to just one or the other. I sense it to how much of one and how much of the other, right? And here's the other issue. If you've got black, right? If you see things as black and then you're thinking like, okay, well, what is not black, right? Then you think, well, it's obviously white. But when you think in that way, you miss out on all the other colors. So obviously this is just like a sort of trite example with just black and white. But if all you think there is black and white, then you're going to miss out on the intricacies of like infinite shades of color, right? But like my point here is that this doesn't just apply to like the shades of color and stuff. This applies to basically everything in life. You can think of any example of like, you know, like doubt and confidence. If you think there's like, you know, confidence, extreme confidence or extreme doubt, then you're going to miss out on different levels of confidence and different levels of doubt that you might be able to leverage to actually get what you want. And by seeing the opposite of black, you miss out on a whole spectrum of colors. So you don't want to perceive things as like right or wrong or polar opposites. You want to try to see what is between them. And John F. Kennedy once said the absence of war is not peace, right? So like a lot of people look at it and they think, yeah, it's either peace or war, right? You know, we're either in conflict or we're not in conflict. We're either at war, or we're either in a period of peace. But really it looks like this. It's like, well, how much war and how peaceful are the times? So like, if you're over on the left, then it's just war and there's hardly any peace. But like, there's always going to be some peace and there's always going to be some war, right? So no matter how peaceful things are, there's always going to be some conflict and some like war, because if you take peace to an extreme, then you'll create war, right? Because there's always going to be people that want to take advantage of peace, right? And if you take war to an extreme, then there will always be peace because people want to achieve peace, right? So it's never, we're never at war, we're never at peace. It's kind of like, how peaceful are the times, or how much war are we in? And it's the same thing with like success and failure. So people see like people and they're like, yeah, we've got successful people and we've got people that have failed. And like they see it like this, where it's like, yep, you're either successful or you're a failure. Well, I would propose this, like how successful and how much of a failure? Because like the average person might look at me and think he's successful, but then like a successful, really successful person might look at me and think he's a failure. Because to like Jeff Bezos, if he made like a couple of million, he'd be like, that dude's a failure. But then he wouldn't call me a failure because he understands non-binary thinking. So he'd probably be like, he's way more of a failure than I'd like to be, right? Like it's never hot and it's never cold, right? It's always how hot or how cold. You're never rich, you're never poor. It's how rich or how poor are you? Like you need to learn to see the world in this way. It's called spectrum thinking, right? And you need to learn. It's kind of like what I said earlier, like, do I drink my whole protein shake now or do I not drink my protein shake at all? It's like, well, actually, like how much protein shake should I drink now? Maybe a little bit and then have the rest later, right? I know it's a weird, shallow example, but like all of these things that we covered earlier, if I just finish the slides here, because, you know, if you want to be successful, it helps to be able to see things humans can't see. And you need to see if you can come up with some examples. But like, you know, with this sort of like spectrum thing, right? It's you can bring this to any example, right? So like it's like, am I changing or am I staying the same? It's like, well, that's not the thing. You're never just changing. You're never just staying the same. It's like, how much constant are you holding or how much change are you having, right? Or you're not friendly and you're not hostile, right? It's how friendly are you or how hostile are you? And like how friendly you are will be in contrast to how hostile you are. So they work in tandem, but you need to learn to see the world in grayscale as opposed to black and white, because otherwise you're going to miss massive intricacies. So it's kind of like the way that I made cold outreach work really well, and the way that I make other channels and other organic attraction methods and ads and sales stuff work really well is by being like quality or quantity. And then people see like cold email as like quality or quantity. And then like what happens is they do one or the other. Whereas I'm here like, well, how much quantity or how deep quality, right? Or like sales, I'm like, how aggressive, how passive, right? Everything is I'm never, ever, ever seeing the world in one or two ways. I'm never seeing it as black or white. I'm never putting a big red divide down the middle and seeing one or the other. I'm always seeing one extreme, the other extreme, and all the intricacies in between. Because when you see all the intricacies in between, you get to act and behave in accordance with those intricacies, and often they will be the key that unlocks the success that you need. So that's non-binary thinking. See if you can come up with some examples. Like this is kind of fun for you now, because you get to discover what I discovered, and you have the pleasure now of going through with the knowledge I've given you, which is pretty detailed, as I think, right? In contrast to someone that hasn't got any detail. So you can see, like, you can start to apply this non-binary thinking. If I was like, this is the most detailed program on non-binary thinking ever, then I'm kind of being binary. Like, there's going to be more stuff to learn here. There's always going to be more to learn and more to apply, but you've got a strong basis and a strong foundation, or at least a stronger one than you would have had if you didn't do the video, right? So that's Polarity Paradoxes. This thinking has served me incredibly well. It's made me lots of money. and it's made me a very happy person. It's given my life more meaning, and it's basically allowed me to navigate with more precision, and it's allowed me to basically achieve more goals. And I'm sure it will help me achieve more goals, and I'm glad to have shared it with you. So that's everything for today's video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.